All world. Let's talk some trades. It's the trade deadline. It is our favorite time of the season content-wise because it's just coming at us a million miles an hour. There's like 100 things going on right now at once. There's so many trades going on. Firstly, before we get into all of that, I wanted to introduce everybody. I am Jeff Carr, the host of the Locked On Reds podcast, and along with me, I've got two Pauls, and I'll let them go. Paul, tell me about the Rockies. Tell me what's going on, and tell me about yourself.
Not only do you have two Pauls, you have two Paul Francises because
That's
we
right.
are also both Paul Francises. I'm excited to be here. I wish the team I covered, which I'm the host of Locked On Rockies for all you fans out there. But I'm excited to be here. I can't believe all this stuff is happening. And now that this Baez deal is done, Trevor Story's probably going to stay in Colorado. That's my big hot take right now.
Yeah, it's done. Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking before I was really introduced there. Look at that.
Sully, go right ahead, man. You need no introduction.
I joke. Of course I do. I'm Paul Francis Sullivan, but because we've got too many Paul Francis here, just call me Sully. I'm the host of Locked On MLB, and my team is trading today because I cover all the teams. But there's so many weird things happening right now. I'm convinced that the Mariners have once again probably traded another closer and are getting someone else's closer. I just assumed they were going to trade for Kimbrel and then flip him to the Phillies or something weird. I don't understand what the Mariners are doing. I don't understand what the Rays are doing, but it's too late because we're already moving on to where the Mets doing, the White Sox are doing, and the Brewers are doing, the Braves are doing. Everyone's doing something. Jose Barrios is off, and Scherzer just seemed like so long ago. That's yesterday's news. And I'm by the way, I'm getting carpal tunnel syndrome refreshing MLBTradeRumors.com right now, which, by the way, this is what tax season is to H&R Block. This is to MLBTradeRumors.com. And I was a big banner thing at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time yesterday, which was Scherzer's heading to the Padres. And
I was going to say, I think I've worn like a divot in my screen protector just refreshing Twitter to figure out what's going on. It's crazy.
Yeah,
and
it's crazy. It's crazy. And I'm going to yield because I got 1,000 things to talk about here. And oh my God, Trout's been DFA'd. Trout has been DFA'd.
What?
Sully, stop following the unverified Twitter accounts. All right, we've got a lot to
get
to. And
wait a minute. I'm unverified.
The first that I want that's a sore subject around the Locked On MLB water cooler. But the first thing I want to get to happened almost immediately right before the trade. And then I said that, and then something else happened. So before anything else happens, I want to bring in AJ, host of the Locked On Blue Jays podcast, because Blue Jays have been busy. They were super busy getting probably the other best pitcher on the market other than Max Scherzer. AJ, how are we looking?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you acknowledge just how good Brad Hand is and how excited I am to finally have him in Toronto after months of crying and begging, please, Blue Jays, sign Brad Hand. I want him in Toronto, and he's finally there. And no, I assume you're talking about the guy we just traded our number 2 and number 4 prospects for.
Man, that was a steep deal. How are you taking it? Are you looking at this like, ooh, was this too high a price to pay, or what are you thinking?
So here's the thing. On the surface, giving up I should say what the actual trade is. Blue Jays got Jose Barrios from Minnesota. La Máquina arrives for Austin Martin, who was the 5th overall pick in last year's draft, and Simeon Woods Richardson, who they got in the Marcus Stroman deal. On the surface of that, especially when you look at the Scherzer deal, and I've had people on Twitter being like, oh, well, they paid more than the Dodgers and didn't get a Trey Turner, so what's up? First of all, Barrios has control. Most valuable thing at the deadline. He's a year and a half, and the Blue Jays are kind of looking at 2022 as well. They've got a lot of teams to leapfrog, so if they don't make it in 2021, now at least they have Barrios for 2022. So they have some good stuff there. Second, if you look at the prospects dealt, Simeon Woods Richardson, from the moment he arrived in Toronto, was perpetually a trade chip. No one thought that kid was going to pitch ever in the Rogers Center wearing a maple leaf on his head. Everyone assumed he's just going to get flipped for when they're contending. And lo and behold, it happened. Now, for Austin Martin, a lot of people thought when he was drafted, like, they have Bo Bichette, what are they going to do? So the plan was center field. They signed George Springer to that major deal in the offseason. So now center field's off the table. And if you look at second base might be the most plentiful spot in the free agent market, just with all the shortstops available in the offseason. So you don't need to groom an Austin Martin, especially if you're looking at making a move in 2022, which is what the Blue Jays are doing with moves like this, with also some of the other trades they've done, which I can talk about later. But Austin Martin did not fit the window, and he did not fit the positions that the Blue Jays already have. So that made him very expendable, especially when you consider how much middle infield depth the Blue Jays have. They have Jordan Groshans, who's tearing the cover off the ball in the minor leagues. They have Otto Lopez, who has a 900 OPS. They have Aurelvis Martinez, who's one of the hottest prospects in baseball right now. They are so chock full. They can take an Austin Martin and be like, but his power is not that great. Here, you can have him, Minnesota, whatever. When I did my deadline preview episode, I thought they were going to have to maybe include a Nate Pearson in this kind of deal to get Berrios pride away from Minnesota. So looking at the pieces that moved, I'm actually really happy because as our former GM, Alex Anthopoulos, would say, prospects are prospects. They can go either way. If you can get a sure thing, you get it. And Berrios is as sure a thing as you can get from a starter these days.
AJ, can I ask a quick question here? Because you obviously know the Blue Jays a heck of a lot more than I do. In terms of the rotation they have, are Ray and Ryu under control for next year as well?
Ryu he'll still have 2 years left on, I believe, on the deal he signed in the offseason. It was a 4-year deal. Robbie Ray only signed a 1-year deal in the offseason. So he is going to be a free agent, and I would advise the Blue Jays to start talking with him about an extension because he is looking good.
Well, then in so many ways, this is like they've made their big offseason move already. That they have Berrios in here. You know you're going to have a good 1 and 2 on this team for next year. So that may be a way to kind of convince Robbie, say, hey, look, you could be on a contending roster. You don't have to carry this rotation right now. And there's probably going to be such an excitement for the 2022 team when they get to play all their home games in Canada, as opposed to being the Globetrotters and the bingo long traveling all-stars and Motor Kings. Thank you, anyone who got that reference. Congratulations for being over 40 years old. But I think this in so many ways is a great move for next year. I don't think the Blue Jays have enough to overtake. I think Oakland's better than Toronto. That's just my right now. But Toronto has the offense, and with that, they have they could have a pitching staff that could really challenge Boston and Tampa, and if Stacey Gotsulias is listening, the Yankees in for next year. So I think this is a great move for Toronto, quite frankly.
Where do you think this puts them in the race right now this year with Boston and New York and Tampa and everything going on immediately?
Are you asking me or are you asking AJ?
Anybody, everybody.
Well,
Let's go.
I don't think Toronto has the horses to pass Boston. I think how far back are they of the Red Sox? Right, they're 9.5 games behind Boston. I don't care how badly the Red Sox play down the stretch. They're not going to blow 9.5 games to Toronto. I do think they're 7 games back, or 7 or 8 games back of Tampa Bay. So I think the division's off the table. The main thing is, will Oakland fall apart down the stretch? I don't think they will, because I think their starting pitching is too good. The A's starting have not that their pitching reminds me of the 1993 Braves, but they won't go on a prolonged losing streak, and so I think that will hamper the Blue Jays. But if a team does wet the bed, the Blue Jays are right there, and we know they can hit. Look what they did to the Red Sox yesterday. And we know they could score piles of runs. And they now have a good 1-2-3. So if a team does collapse, the Blue Jays are in great shape, but they're in really great shape for next year. That's, I guess, the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, they seem to be in a position where I think this is a move more for next year. I think with being 4.5 out in the wild card and 9.5 there out of the AL East, I think this is a smart move for now, and it's one that is going to go really well for next year. And I think the Blue Jays are going to be a force to be reckoned with here, especially next year. And they're definitely going to make a lot of noise late and throughout this last half of the season, especially going back to Toronto. I think that's going to be a huge deal for the team in terms of the mental side of the game. But I think this is going to have big implications in 2022.
And I was going to say before my internet just decided to censor me, love that Canadian Wi-Fi. If you look at a lot of the moves the Blue Jays made heading up to the trade deadline, they didn't do a lot of renting. Brad Hand was the only rental player they actually got that was on a 1-year deal, aside from Corey Dickerson, who they basically had to take in order to get Adam Simber from the Marlins. But Simber's under team control until 2024. Trevor Richards, who they got from Milwaukee, team control until 2024. Barrios under control for 2022. It's definitely looking to make sure they have the pieces in the window without giving up a lot for just this year. Because as I was going to say, there's a lot for them to have to overcome to actually make the playoffs. I think they're like, I didn't check the standings this morning, but I think they're like 5 back of the A's for the second wild card spot. Someone can fact check me.
They are, well, they're 2 back in the loss column, but they are 4.5 altogether back. Yeah,
so about a 5-game makeup. And then you got to leapfrog the Yankees, which are just acquiring any player who they think can hit out of that little league sandbox they call a stadium. They have to leapfrog the A's. They have to do battle with the Mariners and the Angels. And there are a lot of teams they have to try and overcome. Granted, the schedule gets a lot better. They don't actually face the Red Sox aside from, I think, 3 games in September. So they should be able to head with some of these teams they're actually battling and have the potential to make up ground. They have a great run differential. They can tear the absolute cover off the ball.
Canadian Wi-Fi.
Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins saw the same thing that
Well, there you go. By the way, please, everyone, make sure before anyone retweets anything, make sure that you are getting it from a verified site. If you see Jeff Passan with 2 N's or Ken Rosenthal where there's an E in the middle of it, it's like, oh my God, the Yankees just acquired Chris Bryant. Relax, the Yankees didn't just acquire Chris Bryant. But someone posted.
You'll know it's real because I will be switching from Zevia to whiskey at that point if that happens. So
are you telling me a Canadian is drinking? A Canadian is drinking. That is news.
Breaking news.
I know, right?
Breaking news.
I'm trying to be real. I'm trying to stick to the Zevia, but if I learn that the Yankees have put together a lineup with Bryant, LeMahieu, Rizzo, Torres, Judge, Stanton, Gallo, and Sanchez, I need
and they'll
something
still miss
to deal
the
with
playoffs.
that.
They'll still miss the playoffs.
This trade deadline keeps getting crazy. I mean, there's so many moves that have been going on. AJ, I appreciate you giving us the time to talk about this.
No problem. Like I said, I can do it whenever. I know we don't have a lot of interaction with you guys considering the schedules and aside from some miraculous second coming of the Troy Tulowitzki deal, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, there he goes.
I had to wear the Tulo jersey in honor of another shortstop being dealt at the deadline, maybe, but I don't think that's happening.
Well, I have Bautista up for the Olympics going on right now, so
there you go. I will continue to love watching the Blue Jays, and all of those sons of great Rockies players were always fun to watch. And it's always the Blue Jays are going to be one of the most fun teams in baseball for a long time to come. And it's going to be, I think, really, really cool for the game.
I actually am I the only one who thinks it's crazy when they're doing that Field of Dreams game that they didn't have the Blue Jays, where you'd have the sons of the players like Kevin Biggio and Vladdy Jr. and Bo Bichette and all them, and then you cut to the stands and you see the fathers watching the sons. I mean, how much more Field of Dreams can you get there?
You would have, you know what would have made that easier? If the White Sox weren't stupid enough to trade Fernando Tatis for James Shields.
Well, you get James Shields, you gotta, you can't give that up. They're going to sign. I think a team's going to sign James Shields and try to flip him for Tatis Jr. to see if it can work the other way.
Yeah.
By the way, I pointed something out on Twitter the other day that Brian Cashman has been the general manager of the Yankees longer than Fernando Tatis Jr. has been alive. If you want to know, if you ever think about maybe time to shuffle the deck, every once in a while it's good to shake the Etch-a-Sketch and maybe get a new point of view. He's been in there so long that when he got the job, people were saying this sentence: "Man, I can't wait for the Star Wars prequels. I bet they'll be great."
Oh God, I wasn't even saying that, and I was like 8.
Yeah, I was 20. Yeah, what I'm saying is, AJ, I'm old.
Timeless.
But timeless, exactly. Timeless. Well, I want to just talk because there's so many things going on here, and I don't mean to throw a wrench in, but some of these trades actually don't involve the Blue Jays. But I did not know until I sat down and hit, enter room about the Baez trade. So Baez is indeed heading to the New York Metropolitans.
Exactly.
So I guess if Lindor comes back, Baez will move to third, or maybe Lindor's not coming back. I don't know the answer to that. But of the two of them, the two trade chips from Chicago, Bryant or Baez, I thought for sure Bryant was the one who was going to New York. I just thought it was the perfect fit. And but now we have here, this is according to Andy Martino and John Heyman, that Javi Baez who should be a Cub for life, but he's not going to be, is heading to the Metropolitans, and it looks like Trevor Williams is involved in the trade. I'm guessing there's all sorts of pending physicals and everything needs to be done, but wow, this
well,
is
I tell you
really...
what, it's funny that you mentioned that because, and AJ, I want to thank you so much for coming on first thing to talk about this trade, because next up we are calling on the host of the Locked On Mets himself. He's here to talk about this deal because I think he would agree with you. I think he was expecting a different Cub. Ryan, how are we looking?
I gotta act excited here. This was not my number one trade I wanted. I was all in on Chris Bryant. I've been in turn here. Pete Crow Armstrong is a significant prospect that's going back to Chicago. Jorge is having a pretty good deadline here between his return on the Kimbrel trade and this one. Pete Crow Armstrong could be a really good player, but he's out for the year with a shoulder injury, a torn labrum. So he's not going to reach the majors until maybe 2024. The Mets give up one prospect. They get Baez, who Lindor loves. And when this trade went down, they were saying on the field, Lindor, Edwin Diaz, and some others were jumping around, screaming and yelling. The entire team loves this move. So how am I going to say this is a bad trade for the Mets if all the guys are so excited about it? And I think what's going to happen here is Javi Baez will be the second baseman. Jeff McNeil will move to third. And you're going to have that dynamic Puerto Rican double play combination up the middle, maybe for years to come. I mean, honestly, considering the prospect they gave up, I feel like they're going to sign him long term, which I don't necessarily love, but the fans will, and it should be a lot of fun.
Well, I will say this opens up a very interesting random storyline this weekend with Amir Garrett coming to New York and Javi Baez joining him there. So that could be interesting to watch. But the idea of trading away Pete Crow Armstrong so quickly after drafting him, what does that kind of lead you to believe about their chances at really going far in these playoffs this year, much less winning the NL East?
Well, I think the first reaction is Sandy Alderson was pretty upset that Brody Van Wagenen traded Jared Kelenic, so he got him back and traded Pete Crow Armstrong. We don't get to enjoy any of these center field prospects that the Mets drafted, but I do think that they had to make a trade the fan base was just dying for something. Steve Cohen, as the owner, is a fan as well, who was, knocking on the front office's door every day. Let's get something here. And Chris Bryant maybe would have cost more than Pete Crow Armstrong. So if that's ultimately what it came down to, you have your players clamoring for Baez. You get the guy to come in right now. Lindor's out for the next probably 3 more weeks at least. So he's your shortstop. You don't have to be starting Jonathan Villar at short anymore. That's obviously a big upgrade. And then, when the playoffs come around, the Mets are going to have a pretty interesting infield with McNeil, Lindor, Baez, and Alonso. That's pretty stacked.
And I think when we were talking about the Jose Barrios trade to Toronto, I think this is as much a move for next year as well. I mean, obviously they're in first place now, hanging on by their fingernails on the fact that the rest of the National League East is unaware that these games count. But the Mets are probably going to win the division by default. How far they get is anybody's guess. But if they sign Baez to a long-term deal and bank that they're going to have a healthy Syndergaard and DeGrom next year, then they could say, yeah, we made the playoffs this year. It's a new lease on life. It's a new page turn. But now we have this infield, potentially the greatest infield they've had since Olrud and Olrud and Alfonso, Ordonez and Ventura. This is the new answer to that. But what it also is, and you made a great point, it's the new ownership. What this really reminds me of is about 10 years ago, or a little less than 10 years ago, when the new ownership took over the LA Dodgers from the McCourts. They made a bunch of moves that didn't necessarily propel them to the World Series right away, but kind of sent a message to the fan base and to the players. Hey, all the shenanigans are gone. Like, all the McCourt nonsense is over. We acquired Zach Greinke. We trade for Hanley Ramirez. And as I said, not every move they made necessarily worked, but within the first year of the new ownership, they had brought in Adrian Gonzalez, Hanley Ramirez, and Zach Greinke to the team just years after being cheapskates. And so for the Mets and their fans to say, hey, look we're going to trade for Lindor. We're going to pick up Baez. We're going to act like a big market team, as opposed to acting like the Flushing Rays. And so, I mean, I think Met fans have been, and I don't mean to speak for you, Ryan, but I think Met fans have been so frustrated that their team has New York in front of their name, and yet they don't act like a New York team. And if nothing else, it's changing the attitude. I saw it change with the Dodgers, and it ignited the fan base. The Dodger Stadium was empty 10 years ago. People weren't going to the games. And now it's the biggest draw in the National League. And I think the same thing can happen in the Mets. This is a complete change in personality that's going to go towards 2022 as well.
Yeah, I think, I got to change the way I'm conditioned a little bit, because you get to prospect hugging and you say Pete Crow Armstrong's going to be great. And I can look at Javi Baez and I can point out the 36% strikeout rate and look at his weighted runs created plus and say, how great of a hitter is he? And maybe I don't want him long term. But at the end of the day, the fact is, what we just saw with the Dodgers, if the Mets are now in that league, it really doesn't matter as much to give up on one prospect to make a deal, or to even acquire a player and sign him to a big contract. Because worst case scenario, you can eat a lot of money on a contract and ship a player out in 4 years if it's not working. So I think that at times you got to look at the bigger picture. And the big picture for the Mets right now is you're getting a star player at the deadline. And there's been a lot of years where they haven't been able to do that. So
right, yeah, there's been so many years where Met fans are going, why aren't we buyers? I mean, yes, they the biggest buying that they made was probably Cespedes when they acquired him, but that was kind of fluky. And it wasn't that Cespedes was one of the big, huge. I mean, he was an all-star, but it was his impact on the team when he came over there from the Detroit Tigers. But this is a change in philosophy of a team that just even a few months ago had this cloud over them of oh, they're the Mets, and the meme from Family Guy and everything like that. And it's sort of like, no, we're going to try to take over this city and make it the mid '80s all over again. So bust out the cocaine and let's make some Mets magic. Oh, the views of this do not reflect Locked On Network.
Well, this trade means that the Mets were in the market for a shortstop. Paul, your thoughts on that?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, Ryan. I mean, the Mets were I actually thought the big trade that was going to happen, I thought the Mets were going to get a Gray Story deal done. I thought that with the risk that they were going to take on Story, because I know a lot of people are concerned about Trevor Story's down offensive year, but there's so much bad stuff that has happened with the Rockies this offseason and things. I think there's a lot of things that contribute to why Trevor Story's offense is down. Plus, if you look at some of the advanced metrics, he's supposed to have like over 20 home runs by now. He has like a lot of numbers where Trevor Story has had bad luck. But on that aside, he's an elite defender and would be a great pairing up the middle there with the Mets. With this deal getting done for one big name prospect, I just wonder what the Rockies are asking for Trevor Story right now. It has to be insane.
Yeah, I wonder that too. I think that when John Gray kind of campaigned to stay in Colorado and maybe pulled his name out of the running, I think that really impacted what the Mets were going to do here, because I think John Gray is way better than Trevor Williams. And that's why I was interested in that package, because I thought John Gray, he could be some insurance for your rotation, but that stuff would play up out of the bullpen in a postseason situation. The 95-mile-per-hour fastball, the great slider. So I thought that made a lot of sense. But when Gray kind of left that package, I think Trevor Story was not as attractive as Pete Crow Armstrong. Not to mention, not as attractive as Baez to get a Pete Crow Armstrong. But I think that, it's really a big question of what's going on with that front office in Colorado. It seems like a lot of people are kind of talking down on them, whether it's what they're asking for or them just not having a clear direction at the deadline at all.
We're asking that question. We're waiting to get an answer. This is a very important trade deadline being run by an interim GM that most likely will be the GM, but they say they're going to go outside of the organization. Sully, you mentioned earlier it's always a good thing to shake things up a little bit, but that's just not what the Rockies. The only moves the Rockies have made have been to reacquire former Rockies that they have either traded away or designated for assignment. And that's the only thing the Rockies have done here. So the asking price for Story has to just be too high because they don't want people to make fun of them for sending another franchise player away for a bag of peanuts.
Well, that's I was about to say that very thing. This is going to be, they're going to whiff on the Story situation.
Yep.
Because they either asked for too much or they waited too long to pull the trigger on this. And so they're either going to get a bag of gummy bears for him or let him walk and just get a compensation pick for him 1 year after trading away the franchise player who signed a long-term damn deal to stay. Arenado wanted to be he signed a long-term deal saying, hey, we just missed in 2018. We're going to be a contender. Let's go do this. I'll be the centerpiece to this. And they wet the bed. He took a look around and said, I don't want to be here. And so they whiffed on the Arenado trade. And now they're going to whiff on the Story trade. Look at Paul. I hate to break the news to you, but this could put the franchise back. Think if they won one more damn game in 2018, they would have been the National League West champions, and I think have home field advantage in the division series, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And who would they have? Would they have played the wild card? Who would they have played if they won the division that year? They would have LA. They would have played Atlanta. They would have played Atlanta because Los Angeles played Atlanta in the opening round. Would they have beaten Atlanta? I don't know, and neither do you. We'll have to go to whatifsports.com and play that 5,000 times when I should be doing work. But this could be the sort of thing that when you look back, sets the franchise back, 5-10 years, or I hate to say 10 years, but they're not going to get the return for two tremendous trade chips. And that's devastating for Colorado. And we're watching it happen. This is a slow motion. This is two infielders, one cup, and the Rockies are just whiffing on this in an unbelievable way. If anyone got that, please, I beg your forgiveness. But that's what's happening right now, and I don't know what's happening. I mean, for all I know, right now they just trade him for 5 blue chip prospects. But when you have a general manager there who's an interim, who's clutching his blanket like Linus, sucking his thumb, going, "I hope I trade my franchise player well." That doesn't fare well. Look I don't know. The guy could be a great mind. This could be, he could be Jonah Hill in Moneyball for all I know. He could walk in here right now and I would have no idea who he was. Okay.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I have no doubt that people are going to try to take advantage of him. And if he asks for too much, they're going to tell him to kick rocks.
Yeah, and all of that's right on nail on the head. I mean, that's why we're asking so many questions right now about the state of the franchise. They say they're going to go outside of the organization, yet they're letting this interim GM do all of this stuff. I don't know why the GM search is not going to start until the end of next year. Interim GM Bill Schmidt loves to draft. He was a scout before he was the head of scouting. He loves to draft. Deep down, I know he's okay with getting a draft pick if Story walks, because there's been the meme tweet of Rocky's Twitter of, well, Mike Trout was and Trevor Story, they were a compensatory draft picks.
Congratulations. Yes.
Great.
And
but
a guy I know won the lottery too. Yeah. I mean, it's
and then that's the thing. And it's the Rockies don't want to embrace the idea of a rebuild. They always think that they're still in the running. I don't know how you can sit there as a front office and say, we can compete with the LA Dodgers with this lineup with maybe a couple extra bats. That's just not even close. This is the perfect time for the Rockies to reevaluate, rebuild, and embrace something. And unfortunately, get rid of the pieces of the contention window we only got to enjoy for 2 years when it had a possibility of 8 years.
It was so much fun. That team was so much fun.
Exactly. There's an alternate timeline where this season, where Nolan Arenado and Trevor Story are leading the Rockies to, fighting with the division, this slugfest in the NL West, and the Rockies are actually buyers at this deadline instead of trading away Nolan Arenado, not trading Trevor Story. I don't know why you trade Nolan and you don't trade Trevor Story, pretty close to that. And then especially with him, as much as it hurts me to say, I don't know why you're not shopping Germán Marquez right now. The amount that you could get for Germán right now is huge, especially when the Rockies aren't going to get anything. They're not going to compete for the next 3 years minimum. There's just no way that you're going to be able to keep up with the Padres and the Dodgers with their current lineups and their current directions. It's so disheartening as a Rockies fan to just sit here and think that the front office is confident in the team that hasn't won more than one series on the road this entire season. They haven't won 12 games outside of Coors Field, but they don't care, because here's the kicker. The Rockies, they are 6th in MLB attendance this year. They haven't been outside of the top 10 since like 2017, 2016. The Rockies, they benefit from Colorado bringing fans everywhere. And you know what brings fans to the ballpark? Trevor Story, John Gray, and Germán Marquez, because those are the names Rockies fans love. And I think John Gray will be back, but the Rockies really missed any sort of value on Trevor Story, and I can't believe it. As much as it'll be fun to watch Trevor Story play for the Rockies for 2 more months, no one thinks he's coming back. So why is one draft pick better than trying to go after and get a couple of other prospects? Why do you want to solely rely on playing the lottery of the draft? I really don't know, especially in baseball with prospects, who knows how long they could take to develop and turn out.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you this, you've mentioned them a couple of times, and Ryan, I appreciate you coming on. We're actually going to talk to you quite a bit here coming up in hour 2. So take this time now to go grab like a good piece of pizza or something.
Get a Built Bar.
Yeah.
Get a Built Bar.
Built Bar right now.
Built Bars are the best tasting protein bars out there.
Exactly. And now I want to bring in, because you've mentioned them a couple of times, and they have done quite a bit last night into today. It just became official. The deal that sends probably the best pitcher in baseball to the LA Dodgers, along with some other guy who's really good at playing in the infield as well.
Wonderful.
Is Jeff Snyder. How are we feeling, Jeff?
It hasn't been the worst 18 hours of my life, that's for sure.
Can't say it's the same, Jeff. Can't say it's the same.
I know. I'm sitting here trying to feel bad for Paul. And, the Rockies have a beautiful stadium.
Yes, they do.
That the National Ballpark Museum is half a block away. This is great. if the stadium was angled about 5 degrees, it would be perfect. But other than that, I'm sorry, Paul.
Think about what's legal in Colorado and how much of that is going to be used after this trade deadline.
I'm a nice Mormon boy. That doesn't appeal to me so much. But
and too, I've neglected this. I've neglected to dive into this. If you're just joining us, this is the Locked On MLB Trade Deadline show. I'm your host, Jeff Carr. I'm along with Paul Holden and Paul Sully and the other Jeff. It's nice to have two Jeffs against Pauls.
It's the Jeff Paul gladiator fight here.
Hey, I had an uncle named Paul, and he's dead now, so Jeff's win.
so we win. There have been so many trades going on. We're talking right now about Max Scherzer and Trey Turner to the Dodgers. We've talked about the Blue Jays getting Jose Barrios for 2 top 5 prospects. We've talked about the Mets getting Javi Baez for Pete Crow Armstrong. There's just been so much going on. But Jeff, ultimately, the Dodgers have been trailing the Giants. They've been fighting with the Padres. Does this get them over the edge?
This helps get them over the edge. They're also acquiring Corey Seager and Mookie Betts and Clayton Kershaw in the next few days, which, should probably help too. The Dodgers have been the best team on paper all year. And now they are even more the best team on paper. But they have to start doing it on the field. And I do think that Scherzer and Turner are definitely going to help that. I think Seager and Betts and Kershaw are going to help that too. Getting Corey Knebel back is going to help that. There's a lot of things that are going to help that. And I do expect the Dodgers to win the division. And for me, this is a move for at least as much for October. I mean, the Dodgers go into the postseason one way or the other. The question is, do they have to play in the wild card game or not? And either way, whether they're in the wild card game or in a short 5-game series, or the wild card game followed by a short 5-game series, adding Max Scherzer and Trey Turner is a huge deal. You've got a potential postseason rotation now, a top 3 of Walker Buehler, Max Scherzer, and Clayton Kershaw. And then, you can choose from Tony Gonsolin or Julio Urias or, David Price or whoever else for the 4th starter. There's a whole lot of potential there to be a really, really good postseason pitching staff. And then, also, by the way, all 8 guys in the lineup can hit.
Hey, Jeff, I wanted to bring up something that I brought up on Locked On MLB a couple of days ago. And I noticed you just rattled off about 10 tremendous pitchers for the Dodgers without mentioning last year's National League Cy Young Award winner in Trevor Bauer. That
was intentional, believe it or not.
I know, and I noticed that. And one of the things that I said last week is I think the Dodgers are going to acquire Max Scherzer. And I think not just for the fact that he's Max freaking Scherzer. He's a Hall of Famer. He's someone with postseason experience, and who's still an elite pitcher. But I also think the Dodgers are probably looking around saying we should never have gotten into the Trevor Bauer mess, and we could either have him suspended for the rest of the year or not bring him back or tell him to kick rocks. And it's an easier pill to swallow to say, okay, we don't want him back. If you replace his spot in the rotation with Max Scherzer, who is not only a great pitcher, but by all accounts, a great teammate and a great competitor. And I think that the Dodgers are in a great situation to put all of that. I'm not going to get into the legalities and everything going on because that's not what this is about. I'm just talking about telling him to kick rocks and saying, oh, but what do we do about that talent? Max Scherzer, you got your number 5 starters, David Price, who's a Cy Young winner too. There's so much depth in that pitching staff that I think this allows them to just completely circumvent what could have been some real ugly subplot in the final couple of months of the season.
Yeah, and from a purely practical standpoint, for the most part, what happens with Bauer is out of the Dodgers' hands. Right. MLB will, on their timeline, when they figure something out, they'll do something. I think the Dodgers are pretty sure, and it seems likely that Bauer's not going to be back this year for sure. And people will point to the national situation of Starlin Castro and say, well, there's what the Dodgers should do. And there are definitely some differences between a guy who's under contract for 30 games after suspension's over and owed $1 million versus a guy who's under contract for 2 years and owed $60 million. So, there's definitely some differences, but for this year, Trevor Bauer is most likely not going to be back, hopefully not going to be back. and adding Max Scherzer. Although I have to, if you check my Twitter history, you'll see, Sully, you predicted a couple weeks ago. I predicted on March 24th. I said the Dodgers would trade for Max Scherzer at the trade deadline.
What did I say? I thought I contradicted you. So
no, you just said a week or two ago. I was 3 months ago. So
well, aren't you Nostradamus? Well, I predicted the Joe Musgrove no hitter. I just wanted you all to remember that.
That's true. The only no hitter you've ever predicted, and it happened to come true. It was remarkable.
It only took one.
So Jeff, what you're saying is Sully is Nostradamus, but you're Firstradamus.
Oh, and one thing we learned yesterday from Ken Rosenthal: it's always best to be first.
I never understood the appeal. So this person got it first. Who cares? Oh, guys, do you remember?
Get it right.
You remember when Cliff Lee was traded from the Mariners to the Phillies? Remember who got that first?
No.
Me neither. No one cares. It doesn't matter. No one remembers.
Yeah,
that was one of the biggest trades I ever saw. It basically shifted the power and catapulted the Phillies back into the World Series. I couldn't tell you if you put $10 million on my coffee table and said, that's yours if you tell me who reported first. Come put it back in the bag. I don't know.
Yeah, hey, you got to be a newsbreaker. So, but
then you'll be wrong. Then you'll people reporting that Scherzer was into San Diego yesterday.
It did make it better though. Because I got the highs and the lows yesterday. And honestly, I've wanted Scherzer. Like I said, I predicted in March. I've wanted him for a long time. I thought it was a perfect fit. And so even if yesterday's report had been that Scherzer to the Blue Jays was close, I would have been bummed about it. I was a little bit more bummed saying Scherzer to the Padres, because I don't know if you know this, Dodgers and Padres are in the same division. I think the Rockies are in that division too. I can't remember though. But
that would also probably be if Los Angeles doesn't win the division and the spirit of my late father continues to grab the Giants and somehow has them in first place for the reasons I don't understand. If LA played San Diego in the wild card game, you'd probably be facing Max Scherzer in a do or die game if Scherzer was a member of the San Diego Padres. And I don't wish that on anybody.
Yeah, it seems likely that the two wildcard teams will come from the West, and both of them will be able to line up their rotations for that wildcard game. So yeah, facing Max Scherzer in a one-game elimination didn't sound fun, and so it was not a depressing feeling, but it was definitely I was a little bit bummed. And then as it went longer and longer, and John Heyman saying the deal's not done yet with the Padres, and knowing that John Heyman is just Scott Boris's mouthpiece, that like, okay, he might actually have some information on this since Scherzer is a Boris client. And so, start to feel a little bit better. And the whole time I was thinking, when is Jeff Passan going to tweet something? Because Jeff Passan was silent on the whole Max Scherzer thing all afternoon. I'm like, Passan hasn't said anything. What's going on? Why hasn't Passan said anything? And the first thing Passan said was, it looks like Scherzer's probably going to the Dodgers actually. And by the way, so is Trey Turner. The Dodgers are taking 2 All-Stars from the Nationals, and the Trey Turner thing, I think that was the difference maker for both teams, because for the Dodgers, throwing in a year and a half of Trey Turner makes it palatable to give up 2 of your top prospects. And for the Nationals, we can throw in Trey Turner and we can get a better return. And I do think it's interesting. We're talking about alternate timelines a little bit ago. It would be interesting to see what would have happened if Berríos had been traded first. Because I do think, the Twins got almost as much for Berríos as the Nationals got for Scherzer and Turner. So it'd be interesting to see if the Nationals price on Scherzer would have gone up. But, throwing in Trey Turner made the deal happen for both sides. And for whatever reason, maybe just because I don't know why the Padres wouldn't have been able to match that for Scherzer and Turner. But it might have come down to, Max Scherzer has a no trade clause, and maybe the reason that Scott Boris was whispering in John Heyman's Twitter was because Max Scherzer would rather go to the Dodgers than the Padres. And you know what? I can understand that. Sorry, Javi, but I get it. I hope Javi's backstage watching this right now.
I wish I could just chime in and be like some fun thing, but that was just a nice solid segment of misery for us Rockies fans.
It's almost as if Jeff prepared. It was like I don't know what to do with it.
You look at the current Dodgers lineup, and that's a fantasy team, that's a franchise team in MLB The Show right now. I mean, and just to sit there to think that the Rockies interim GM Bill Schmidt and Dick Momford are sitting there and being like, you know what? We have Coors Field, and they have to come pitch here, and then they can stay at our luxury apartments right across the street because that's what we care about more instead of going after big deals for big pitchers or doing anything at the deadline.
Hey, Jeff.
Remember, the Dodgers still have to play the Rockies a ton this year. So the NL West gets to just pick on the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks to see who's actually going to have to play in that really tough wild card or get to go to the next division. Because they got to be salivating to know that the road Rockies get to go into their ballparks to try and piece together some wins when Trevor Story is going to be not even interested for the rest of the season, and they can't even score runs when their starting pitching is actually good on the road. Kyle Freeland, back-to-back shutouts in his last appearances for the opposing teams, and he's only given up no more than 3 runs in his past 6 starts.
Bitter? So there's a little bit of bitterness.
I'm so bitter. The clock is ticking. I'm just scrolling through Rocky's Twitter, and it's just a bunch of bitter fans. While Jeff is over here sitting on the top of the gold, the top of the division. I know they're not there right now, but like let's be honest. The top of the NL West has long been where the Dodgers have sat, and I'm not going to be surprised if they're sitting up there again at the end of the year.
I'd be honest with you, right? Like the last time there was any movement of any of the playoff teams, like there are 10 playoff teams right now, and when July ends in 2 days, it'll be the exact same 10 teams in the postseason in postseason spots for the entire month of July. There'll be no movement. The last time a team was in a playoff spot that isn't currently in the playoff spot was oddly the Cubs in late June. The Cubs were like on the 20th or the 21st, the Cubs were in first place. And now they've traded everything but the remains of Ernie Banks. And even that, they're looking to maybe swing a deal and maybe get a low-level prospect for that.
They never should have thrown that no-hitter against the Dodgers.
It's true. The minute that happened, they just completely went into an absolute spiral. And now, so the teams that are making the trades, I mean, you look at the teams that are on the outside looking in, like Philadelphia and the Reds, and who are making deals right now. And the Phillies just made a deal. I think they just acquired Gibson from Texas, if my Twitter feed is correct. And that's a huge move. I mean, Gibson's a front runner to win the American League Cy Young Award this year. And not now. Not now. He's off to Philly. And Philly is banking on the Mets being possessed by the 2007 Mets because they're banking for a collapse because there's no way the Phillies are catching the San Diego Padres for that second wild card spot. They can. Yeah. I think are they even 500 now after that comeback? I think when they won that wild game where they hit the walk-off grand slam yesterday, I think that put them at even 500. Here we are heading into August, and let me just check here. Yeah, they're 51-51, a true world beater. And they still have their bullpen was, they called for Calvin Schiraldi to see his availability. They wanted to see if Byung-Hyun Kim could come in to have someone who was that much of a clutch pitcher on their staff. And they're making trades right now. I think Kennedy might have been involved in that trade as well. So I guess they're hoping that he boosts their bullpen. But I guess what I'm saying is for a team like Los Angeles, first of all, it is critical that they win the division because you don't want to have their entire season resting on, like say they play San Diego and, none of their aces have been pitching necessarily great, but all of a sudden Joe Musgrove has one really great game and a bloop happens to fall in. You don't want to have this entire season based on that. But if LA does move on, I actually think the biggest threat to them right now is the Brewers. I think the Brewers remind me a little bit of the 2010 Giants, who went up against the Phillies, who had a absurd fantasy baseball team in 2010. and wound up beating them because their pitching matched up with the Phillies and their hitting was just good enough. And if I were LA, and I'm not, even though I'm right up the 5 from Dodger Stadium here in Pasadena, the Brewers would be the team that I think would be the scariest team. Although, the Giants, I don't understand. I watch them a lot. Dad, I hope you're happy. I don't get it. I look at this Giants team. They're a wild card team. I don't think they're a bad team. I think they're a mid-80s, high 90 win team. They're on a pace to win 101 ball games. I do not understand it. And if they win the division, it will be the ultimate smoke and mirrors division win I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I got a thought on that here in just a minute, but I want to reset everybody. Thank you for joining us here on the Locked On MLB Trade Deadline show. We are live reacting to everything that is going on. There is officially, a little less than 10 minutes, 9.5 minutes left until the deadline, which of course there can still be stuff in the pipeline that just takes reporters a minute to get to. So there could still be some stuff reported after 4 p.m., but 4 p.m. is the deadline. And before we jump back into that conversation about playoff teams and the NL West and things like that, I wanted to read a comment because I'm not able to get our Locked On Cubs host Joe Kilgallen on. He's got some stuff he's taking care of right now, but he did give me a statement. He said the Cubs won't win again for another century, and to top it off, they just helped their crosstown rival. Change was needed, but not to this extent. Ownership got their one ring, and now they're looking to rebuild after telling the fan base they would never have to again. And I think I'll add on to that the obvious guy that isn't on the move, who has said before he probably isn't going to re-sign with the Cubs, is still a Cub. So with the Cubs being that goofy and with the NL West looking that crazy, let's have 2 questions right here. Did the Cubs get it right or wrong? And who is the most vulnerable current playoff team in the NL or the AL?
I'll throw out the Mets.
Okay.
The Mets are. I mean, not because they're on pace to win 85 games, and they should be running away with the division as bad as everyone else. Everyone else is 500 or sub 500, but the fact that they've let those other teams hang around, they are a bad 2-week spell and a good Atlanta or Philadelphia spell away from coughing it up. Those other teams are 500 or sub 500 heading into August and only 3 or 4 games back of first place. So I think the Mets are.
Sorry, breaking in here real quick. We are seeing from Passan Bryant to the Giants. Chris Bryant is to the Giants. This is verified real Jeff Passan.
Not with two ends.
This is not Del Passan. This is a blue check mark. Bryant to San Francisco.
For what? For what?
And then nothing more than that yet. And then in case you're still curious about the Rockies, MLB beat reporter Thomas Harding did just tweet out with nothing. Oh, the intrigue. So maybe something right at the buzzer for the Rockies here. But the big news, again, more stuff. The NL West still getting better. Well, part of the NL West is still
getting better. Source tells ESPN. I may change my name to Source.
Yeah, Chris Bryant is now the only member of the Giants under the age of 50, I think.
It's true. Unbelievable. And he helped put a nail in the 2016 Giants' hopes. Big rally in the playoffs when the Giants were hoping to keep that even number stuff alive. But yeah, wow. Chris Bryant to San Francisco. You know what? Didn't see that one coming.
No, that's a big move for them, especially kind of looking at their lineup. That's been the one thing you look at and you say maybe it's a saleable, but I tell you what, that NL West race, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch as somebody from the outside who doesn't have a horse in the race. But as a fan of an NL Central team, I'm looking at it now as, okay, the Reds have to catch the Brewers. There's no wild card for anybody outside of the West. Now it is whoever wins the Central and whoever wins the East and the 3 NL West teams at the top.
Hey, Matt Morrill is on there. He said, finally, some Giants talk. Hey, Matt, I've invoked my dead father twice on this, okay? How much more do you want?
That is true.
We've talked about Sully's dead dad and my dead uncle, you know.
Yeah.
They're all willing the way, I guess.
Welcome to Locked On Death.
I mean, it is the deadline talk. So
okay.
I just misunderstood what we were doing here.
Have a good
one. Man, it has been.
I'm interested though with this happening. We've talked Dodgers, we've talked Giants. Still nothing for the Padres. And the Padres were in on Joey Gallo. They were in on Max Scherzer, and I still, we see trades trickle in 20 minutes after the deadline sometimes. So, but I don't know who, Barrios has been traded. Kyle Gibson's been traded. If the Padres are looking for a starting pitcher, and they probably are because their starting pitchers appear to have started struggling right around the time that MLB cracked down on sticky stuff, interestingly. But, I don't even know what the options are for them. And this might end up being as disappointing as yesterday was for the Padres. Today might end up being even more disappointing.
They've been linked when they acquired Daniel Hudson to be in their bullpen, which is odd that that's their big move, is the fourth best reliever on the market. And they've been linked to Kenta Maeda, but they also were linked to Max Scherzer. Linked doesn't mean piddly poo at this point. They need to get. I thought I thought Gibson was going there too. That's why I was surprised when I saw that Philadelphia picked them up. So, yeah, this is right now I'm on MLBTradeRumors.com, which I'm surprised not only hasn't crashed but hasn't caught on fire. But right now it just says Chris Bryant to the Cubs, reports Jeff Passan. No names.
Yeah, we don't have anything about the return. And and the Padres did get Adam Frazier the other day, to be fair, so it's not like they haven't had anything at this deadline. But seems like for what they were, the aim they were taking, and we do still have a minute and a half left before the deadline, but for what they were aiming at, I don't know.
And the Padres did just make a trade, according to the real Jeff Passan. He said Jake Marisnick is headed to San Diego. So they did make some kind of a trade.
Well, there's book the parade right there. They got Marisnick.
Don't know about Chris Bryant,
but they got Marisnick. So
back-to-back NL West, Passan bombs. Does that mean a Rockies one is coming?
But wait a second. But before I poop all over Jake Marisnick, let's not forget that because we pretty much know who the playoff teams are, we aren't going to know who's going to win this until October moves around. Because like a few years ago, the big fish out there that everyone was trading for was Manny Machado. And what became the biggest move at the deadline? Steve Pearce. Marco Scutaro turned out to be the biggest move of 1 year. Cody Ross turned out to be the biggest move. We don't always know. It's sometimes it is that weird. I always point to Scutaro that when that trade was made, everyone just shrugged. Okay, fine. The Giants need another infielder, and then he wins the NLCS MVP and has a great World Series against Detroit. I don't have to tell Jeff about what Steve Pearce did.
I don't remember that. Yeah.
I know. He did in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and took that whole World Series out of your head. But what I'm saying is that before we chuckle at, they just got Jake Marisnick. I mean, it may be what Marisnick is handed the World Series MVP trophy. Think about who some of the big heroes of some of the recent World Series and postseasons have been. The Cody Rosses of the world, the Howie Kendricks of the world get to be the big heroes, and so there will be an under the radar move that we kind of sniff at that will become a gigantic move when we all have this thing going on in October.
There might be, but you still, when you're making the trade, you'd rather have the good players than try to have a crystal ball who's going to turn into Marco Scutaro. In fact, I think if you go back in time, you'd still, if somebody said, do you want Marco Scutaro or, an actual good player that year, the Giants would take the good player, because he has an even better chance of making an impact.
Yeah. I mean, Hanley Ramirez to LA was a big move that same one, as was Zach Greinke being traded from Milwaukee to the Angels. Those are the ones that got the big headlines that year, and Ichiro going to the Yankees, and it turned out to be Scutaro. So yeah, I mean, I'm just pointing out because we all just sniffed at Marisnick, and then you'll watch an unbelievable World Series by Marisnick. He's the greatest October performance of all time. So
Padres World Series. Can you even imagine?
Well, I saw the kid from left field with Gary Coleman, and it seemed very, very plausible in that film.
Man, you are so old, Sully.
I am. I'm old enough to remember when there was one Star Wars movie, and it was called Star Wars.
That's the year I was born.
There's a lot of Star Wars references today too, Sully.
It is, if I'm not referencing baseball, I'm referencing Star Wars. What do you want from me?
I almost said earlier that I almost said Kyle Gibson's going to have to pull a Rick Sutcliffe if he wants to win a Cy Young Award, but I knew only Sully would get it.
Yeah. Well, he's so I guess that also throws this American League Cy Young Award race. Is Lance Lynn suddenly the AL Cy Young Award frontrunner at this point?
I think Kyle Gibson, being really bad his last two starts, had started to make that a question. Anyway.
That's true, but you take him now out of the conversation. There's not been that dominant force in the middle of this. Anyway, it's all those. AJ should know that Joaquin Soria was sent from Arizona to Toronto. Miles Straw is going to Cleveland. That's interesting. They're getting a reliever back for him. And Andrew Haney, the Angels trade Andrew Haney to the Yankees.
And the Dodgers officially tweeted the Scherzer-Turner trade, so that one is official now.
It's not real until it gets tweeted.
Officially official. Well, Jeff, I appreciate you coming on, talking about the Dodgers and talking about this NL West race now with all these trades going on. And it seems like the NL West has been the most active division in this trade deadline. But we have coming on here now a man that's going to help us host this second hour, and a man who just saw his team trade one of his relievers. He is Millard Thomas. Millard, how we doing?
Hey. How are you guys doing? I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Not good,
today?
Millard. Gonna be honest. Gonna go ahead and officially put myself as not good.
We've gone from the upper echelon of NL West teams now to the other guys that are like, hey, we're here too. So what are you guys thinking?
I was gonna say that exact thing. We're talking so much about the Giants, Padres, and Dodgers. So let's bring on the voices of the Rockies and the Diamondbacks.
Hey, it's all about Merrill, Bleep, and Kelly, right, Sully?
Yeah. Hey, look, if you loved 2017, we have the two podcast hosts for you.
Hey, that's right. Yeah, Paul. I mean, I guess you still have Trevor Story. Can't be too bad of a day, right? He hasn't been moved yet.
He has not been traded. He's going to be there. They're with him. Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry.
The Rockies are officially cool with taking a qualifying offer and letting him walk, because I don't even give it a 1% chance that Trevor Story has any interest in re-signing with the Colorado Rockies. They are gonna roll the dice. I mean, I guess the deals still do come in after the deadline here. Maybe there is something still, but I kind of felt like my mind was made up. Once we talked about it earlier, once John Gray said he'd like to be a Rocky, I think that's when a lot of teams were looking for that Story Gray combo, because everyone was looking for pitching and everyone was looking for, that piece right there brings in a big haul. But the Rockies decide to keep the ship. I don't know if it's afloat. I don't. So
tread in water.
You're in the mountains. You don't understand those boat references.
Exactly. Boats. We're up there. In the mountains without a guide right now is really what it seems like is going on.
A lot of sand out here, not too much water out here.
Yeah, you got mountains and deserts, so maybe you guys shouldn't be talking boats. But you go into the chat there, Janton Shorter just pointed out that Millard Thomas is the most underrated Locked On host. And I want to say, where are the Locked On host ratings? And where do I fit in? Clearly, I'm not verified, so obviously I can't be that high up.
I don't think the Apple reviews would say I'm the most underrated Locked On host, but it's okay. We appreciate Janton Shorter. Thank you, buddy, for that shout out right there.
We like to think of you as the best kept secret in podcasting is Millard Thomas, host of your Locked On Arizona Diamondbacks.
That's right. Yeah, I'm excited.
Jose Ortiz said there in the chat, as a Cub fan here, Bryant and Rizzo will be missed. Thank you for the live feed, fellas. Good stuff. There you go. Someone said they tried to verify me. I know. I'm a mysterious person. Maybe it's because I go by the alias Sully. Yeah. Can I just say, I know we talked a lot about the Cubs earlier, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff, but I really felt that the route to go for the Cubs should have been what the Giants did, which was to keep one or two players that the fan base could point to, like the Giants had, Buster Posey and Brandon Crawford and Brandon Belt. That when you go back to the ballpark, a lot of these names you don't recognize except Yastrzemski for a different reason. But then you can say, oh, but Posey's still here. Oh, yeah. So it's almost as if it's like a safety net for fans wanting to come back. And I felt that I really thought they should have picked either Bryant or Baez to keep as that sort of, oh, but he's still around. When I saw that Bryant hadn't been traded yet, I thought for a second, what if the Cubs realize they need to have at least one star from 2016 to build fours? Nope, everything must go. Supermarket sweep in Chicago.
And I kind of agree with that. Maybe Rizzo should have been that guy because he's kind of their longest tenured Cub before. I don't know if he was, but he's been there since 2011. So he was there definitely during the dog days before that World Series. So maybe that's a good idea. Does baseball still do the waiver wire trade deadline still? I mean, we can still see your guy. They don't? Okay, because I was going to say maybe that your guy Trevor Story could still be moved after, because I always thought that was kind of weird that baseball did that. Why have a secondary trade deadline after we already had a trade deadline? I never really understood
that. Is important to note. They got rid of that. Like today, 4:00 was the day. I mean, there still can be reported trades happen here very soon. I mean, obviously people can get the reports quickly and then send them to us after 4:00. But as of 4:00, I did see like there are some teams that are announcing, like the Padres have said there's no more trades happening. The Reds have said there's no more trades happening. Things like that are moving on. And now that it's past 4:00, actually, I'm a little bit late when it comes to timing, but now that it's past 4:00, we're doing a little bit of a changing of the guard. Paul, it has been awesome to talk with you, sir. I'm sorry that there was no reports of Trevor Story or John Gray or Herman Marquez.
Unbelievable.
Thank you for sending Michael Givens to the Reds. The Reds bullpen
there you go.
Is very
Jeff,
very happy.
We made that happen just for you. And honestly, that for trades that did happen, I think it's a good move for both teams. I think Givens is going to be a good arm for the Reds. And in case anyone is curious about this later trade deadline things, about 3 reporters from the Colorado side have confirmed, and from their sources, that they say the Rockies are staying put and there is nothing yet to come. Story is going to be playing shortstop behind John Gray, who was on the bump tonight. So if you are curious about that stuff, for Rockies fans, I'm going to enjoy 2 more months of Trevor Story. That's really the only way to I think, handle this deadline. But yes, there's a lot more action in the deadline right now. So I got to hand the reins over to people with teams that actually made some moves here. But it was a blast being here, a blast being part of the show. And thanks so much for having me on.
Paul, take her easy. We're now going to bring in, joining Millard, myself, and Sully for a little bit here, we've got Ryan from Locked On Mets. He was already on to talk about the Javi Baez deal, but he's here now to react to what all is going on because he's had some rival movement. The Phillies have made some moves, and there's been some other last-second deals that have been made. We just want to talk about that. John Lester has been traded to the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals have gotten both Lester and J.A. Happ, so maybe they're starting a retirement home. I don't know, but they are bolstering their rotation with that.
What the hell are the Cardinals doing? Well, they're not going to win this Central.
I don't necessarily understand the moves. I mean, the Reds are barely hanging on by a thread as is. The Brewers are just a wagon right now. So it's interesting to see those moves being made. But Ryan, what is your take on the NL East here, even just since we talked to you in the last 20 minutes?
Well, I'm shaking in my boots. Freddie Galvis. I mean, I don't know.
He's
Freddie
back.
Galvis
He's a Philly too. Forgot about that.
Yeah. He might have been a little bit of a Mets killer. I can't quite remember too much. It was the other guys like Michael Franco. I feel like killed the Mets a little more. I'd be more scared about that one. So I think Javi Baez a little bit better than Galvis. I think. Overall, though, it seems like the Braves and the Phillies kind of made moves just in case the Mets choke here. They didn't go all in. They add Austin Riley, the Braves did. They made little tiny fringe moves, but I think those are just to kind of solidify their roster so they can maybe play a little bit over 500 baseball. If the Mets collapse, maybe they'll get the division. But, I mean, clearly the biggest move has been the Javi Baez trade.
Ryan, I don't know if you heard when I said earlier, I think of all the division leaders whose lead is the most, or whose playoff position is in most peril, because obviously the Red Sox and the Rays and all the West Coast teams in the National League are close to each other. I said I think the Mets are the division leader that's in the most peril, and is basically a 2-week slump away from allowing the Phillies to climb, the Phillies or Atlanta to really climb back into this. And I don't know. I think the Mets are going to win the division just because I think they're a better team. But I think the Phillies are like they're like buying bottled water and supplies just in case there's a calamity, and they'll be well prepared to leapfrog and say, oh, maybe it'll be 2007 all over again. I know I'm not supposed to say that year to a Met fan, but
well, and also speaking of 2007, the Mets still play the Marlins, I think 14 times down the stretch, which usually you'd say that's great. They're the worst team in the division, but for the Mets after 07 and 08, makes you a little bit nervous. But honestly, yeah, I think if you're talking about this past series, they had a chance to really put the Braves out of it and only won 2 out of 5 games. So to say that the Mets are going to run away with this division, it's more what they have on paper, but they've been a 500 team for a couple of months now, honestly. So they really need, first of all, if they don't get DeGrom back, I mean, they're not going to make any noise this year. DeGrom, he is throwing again. He should be back soon, but he's had so many injuries this year that it just leaves you kind of wondering if this is the year for the Mets or maybe 2022 is. And if you sign Baez, I guess that's a trade that works out for next year as well. So we'll see.
Right.
Yeah, question for y'all. Do you guys believe in any NL East teams currently? Do you guys believe in the Mets, or maybe the Braves could go on a run and potentially get to the World Series? How are you guys feeling about those NL East teams right now?
The Braves are a sub 500 team in late July. That's how I feel about the Braves. The Phillies are a 500 team, and day after tomorrow will be August. You are what your record says you are. If those two teams had risen to the level of then they'd be in the real run of a division title. The only reason why they can even be in a situation where they could even possibly think of October is the fact that the Mets haven't taken this division under their arm and run with it. And I think those teams aren't good enough. I think the Phillies and the Braves are just not good enough this year to make up that ground. But if they do, this will be a real catastrophe for the Mets, because this is a division that was handed to them. And but I don't believe so, because if we're at the 2/3 mark of the season and you're even 500, that's who you are. I'm sorry, that's who you are as a team.
Yeah, and that's the one thing too with the Braves. Like whenever they lost Ronald Acuna, I admired their tenacity with going and getting Jack Peterson, but that wasn't all that they needed. They had a lot of other needs as well. So I didn't look at them as being any real threat to the Mets. I definitely think it's the Mets and the Phillies. But definitely out of the AL East, I look at the Mets as being a chance to at least make a run in these playoffs, because you also look at adding Rich Hill. And I know that Trevor Williams isn't a huge add, but he at least stabilizes the rotation a bit. I mean, there were 2 guys that pitched against the Reds in their most recent series at Great American Ballpark that, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, I think those guys are out of the rotation now.
Jared Eichhoff for sure. And I've been really hard on Eichhoff this week. I feel bad. I've been ripping it to Jared Eichhoff too much, but yeah, that's for sure. This rotation got some insurance with Rich Hill and Williams, but the only way the Mets make a real run this year is if that ceiling is realized, where you have a playoff rotation of Jacob deGrom, Carlos Carrasco, Marcus Stroman, Taijuan Walker, and maybe even Noah Syndergaard coming out of the bullpen, or if he gets stretched out and healthy, potentially, bumping Walker to the bullpen. That's where the Mets would have a chance. But if you really look at the National League, and I take off my bias here, I think that there's definitely some different tiers here, and the Brewers are the only team outside of the West that I feel like are in that same tier.
Yeah, and we know who the Brewers just picked up, a little Eduardo Escobar action. So I think that's going to definitely add a power bat in the middle of the lineup. Talked to Jake yesterday, and we might see Escobar playing a little bit all over, maybe a little first base too. So I definitely like the Brew Crew. I mean, they might have the nastiest rotation in baseball. It's definitely an argument, but that front three line, I mean, 3 number 1 starters? I mean, not many teams can say that. The Mets can.
And that bullpen is ridiculous.
The bullpen is amazing. But I love this Brewers team for October. You can go in and say you're going to have Peralta, Woodruff, Corbin Burns. Brad Anderson's actually pitched pretty well. I mean, he's going to be a swing man. He's not even going to start. And Hader out of the bullpen. And, bringing in Willie Adames just really solidified their infield defense. And now Escobar gives them a ton of depth in their lineup. Yelich is on. I think Yelich is on the COVID restricted list right now. Mm-hmm. But and he's not having a great year. But you're not asking him to have an MVP season. You say just give us a good 8 weeks, and show up for October. And I think that they haven't had this depth in their pitching staff in their other recent years where they made trips to the postseason. And while I do think the World Series representative for the National League is going to come from the NL West, it would not stun me if it was Milwaukee. And I'm sorry, Ryan, it would stun me if it were the Mets. But it would not stun me if it were Milwaukee. Absolutely not.
Well, I tell you what, too, we've been talking about these playoff teams. We mentioned a couple of deals. I want to jump into some trades that were made, especially we're talking about from the Rangers' perspective here. If you just joined us, we are the Locked On MLB hosts, a bunch of us here. I'm the Locked On Reds host, Jeff Carr. We've got Ryan Finkelstein from the Locked On Mets. We've got Sully. He hosts Locked On MLB on a daily basis. Miller Thomas from Locked On Diamondbacks. And now joining the show, the man who talks about these Rangers who just made a couple of deals, Bryce Patrick. How you doing, Bryce?
I'm fine. Maybe. But if you saw the Locked On Now that is going to be posted soon, you would know that I'm not actually fine. I don't understand this stupid baseball team. They make me so angry.
Well,
so let's start with that. As the return, what you wanted?
Well, it's not that the return isn't what I wanted. It's like the return seems good. So in case you didn't know, Kyle Gibson and Ian Kennedy. Premier closer somehow, Ian Kennedy, who would probably have been my third or fourth choice going into the season. 36-year-old reliever was leading AL in saves when the Rangers weren't absolutely horrendous. Kyle Gibson, who has been very good this season and pretty good for the back half of last year, but no one was paying attention because the Rangers were so trash. They're going to Philly for former top prospect, now major league player, Spencer Howard, who's 25, just got called up this year, and 2 high A prospects, Kevin Gowdy and Josh Gessner. But wait, it also gets interesting. The Rangers are also sending Double-A pitching prospect Hans Kraus, former second-round pick, former top prospect, not quite as much that this year, but finding himself a little bit after being kind of trashed the last 2 years. They're also sending $4 million in the deal because, got to help those poor teams. The Rangers owners are only willing to spend money on teams that are not their own. They're paying for Joey Gallo money. They're paying for Rougned Odor. They're paying for Kyle Gibson. You know what? They might just pay for, I don't know, like Nolan Arenado or something just for no dang reason.
Yeah. Well, we want to welcome Eeyore to the show. Thank you very much for being part of it. It's the most gloomy moment I've ever had. I felt like I watched a Swedish movie. Good God. I just need to take a break.
Yeah, Bryce.
Geez, I'm going to read some poetry to cheer myself up. Holy cow. That was.
I don't want to rub salt on the wounds, Bryce, but I think I kind of called it. And I sent you that little tweet over Twitter saying we might have seen the last home run of a Joey Gallo career in a Texas Rangers uniform. And then he gets traded the next day. I mean, it was pretty devastating, but I was happy to hear from you. Right. Yeah, I'm sorry, buddy.
No, Joey is the one that I'm more upset about. The Kyle Gibson was obviously he's 33, he's doing well. This team sucks. Go be happy, go chase, I don't know, wins in a team that doesn't suck like this one. But the Gallo's been my ride or die since basically he was drafted, and he's just always been so polarizing, always been such a talented player, and seeing him as like a teenager hit 40 home runs, the first teenager to hit 40 home runs in a minor league season in like since like the 70s when he did it back in like 2015 or 12, whenever the heck it was. But like seeing that guy and being like his ride or die, defending him to like haters, and then like once he gets up and starts doing what he's doing, and even people who like still are Rangers fans that don't appreciate or understand how good he is, and defending him, and seeing him like achieve this, and then you lose him because you offer a non-competitive contract extension, and you also don't get a better return on him because ownership won't take a bad Eric Hosmer contract. It's just like this has not been a good week for me, guys.
So who's the player then that's keeping you on the Rangers bandwagon now?
No one. There's no bandwagon. There's no wagon. It is like a
Rice
falling
is the
apart
wagon.
like bike. Like I am there because this is my job, and anyone who wants to never watch a Rangers game for the rest of this year, like I don't blame them for being like, I'm going to go take care of my mental health. I'm going to choose a new team, a fun team that doesn't hurt my feelings on purpose.
Man. Welcome to Locked On Zoloft, where we're trying to make sure we get where we talk to the Texas Rangers. What? It's really
you should
fun
get this
there,
podcast
right?
sponsored by therapy.
I know. God, have a Built Bar. Do something. Good God.
Let's get a sugar rush in you.
I will say two quick updates. They were just reported that the Red Sox acquired Hansel Robles from the Twins, and I think I said that right. And another former Cub is on the move, Jorge Soler, moving from the Royals to the Braves. So the Braves continue to try to acquire outfielders, but again, I don't think that's their biggest problem.
Why?
So
Why? What?
I don't know where that's going to help. So
I guess they could have used Kyle Gibson.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know, like at this point, you look at, if you're Atlanta and you've had this incredibly underwhelming season, a year where I thought they were going to be a World Series contender this year, and that they're sub 500 heading into the trade deadline. Take advantage of this point to see what you have in the farm. Bring everyone up now. You know, hold this as like a prolonged spring training, and get the butterflies out for some people, because Acuna is coming back next year,
right?
And you kind of treat this as a fluke year. It's kind of like that one year when I think it was the year before the Nats won the World Series. They missed the playoffs and they were a bit of a mess, and but they didn't panic, and they put the band back together the next year. They wound up winning the World Series. That's what the Braves should be doing. They shouldn't be trading for Jorge Soler at this point. They should be looking at every top prospect should be in Atlanta right now, getting a tryout, seeing what they could do, getting the butterflies out, and getting their experience and getting their first taste of the big leagues done. So you go into the offseason to know a better chance of what you have to fill, knowing you're putting a legitimate NL MVP candidate back in the middle of the lineup next year. It's absolutely crazy to me what Atlanta acting like they're still in this thing, which is, I guess, a testament to the Mets that they've allowed them to pretend to be in this situation. But they're not. I'm sorry, you're sub 500 heading into August. That's who you are. I'm sorry.
Well, Sully, maybe they're gearing up. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Sully, maybe they're gearing up for that universal DH next season.
That could be.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Sure. But I want to say,
they're gearing to move back to Milwaukee.
The Rangers actually had a season like that in 2014. It was like every single person got injured. That was like the one year that like Beltre was hurt for basically the whole year. I think even Elvis Andrus was hurt that year. Like it was just an absolute mess, and the Rangers were terrible, and they just kind of leaned into it. And then the next year and the year after that, they actually won the AL West.
Yeah,
and so it was just like, just lean into it.
Yeah, I think that's a great. I remember that 2014 Rangers team, because at the beginning of the year I picked them to win the pennant. I thought that going into 2014, I really liked that Rangers. So this team's got it, man. This team's got it. And everybody got hurt. Everybody got hurt.
Even Darvish.
Yeah, everyone got hurt on that team, and Ruben Sierra got hurt. Like past Rangers got hurt. It just was ridiculous.
Too soon.
Sorry, but But then the next 2 years they won the division, and who knows what would have happened if Jose Bautista doesn't hit that home run. They may have gone further in the postseason, but again, maybe it's too soon for that too.
That's definitely too soon.
Yeah, and who knows what would have happened if Nelson Cruz timed that leap a little better, and who knows what would have happened.
In my mind, I just pretend that he did that. To me, it's canon that he did catch that, and the Rangers won the 2011 World Series. It's better for my mental health, and with everything that's going on with this Rangers team, I kind of need to take care of myself.
You need to go to Total Recall, where they put the implant of the memory of the Rangers winning the World Series in your head. That's what you need to do. God, I know what you do, because for years,
someone make that happen.
Years and years, I would replay the final inning of Game 6 of the '86 World Series with the image. I had the image of Marty Barrett catching the pop-up and Bob Stanley jumping into Rich Gedman's arms and Jim Rice accepting the trophy. I could see it as if it happened, and it really I had convinced myself that I had seen that parallel universe, that I could sort of edge it tomorrow my way into that. How many more sci-fi movies am I going to reference in one live stream? We'll find out.
Without turning this into some sort of Twilight Zone episode and deepening the sorrow of Bryce over here. Bryce, Stacy does want you to come on the podcast, so make sure that you do that and talk about Joey Gallo.
I will.
I know it probably hurts, but yeah.
It definitely does. It was basically a Joey Gallo podcast this whole entire year. It's like, hey, it's Joey Gallo and Gibson show. Oh, also Adolis Garcia is really fun. He's been less fun lately, and so he's who I have to hold on to for now.
Tell Gatsoulias it's going to cost you a couple of Built Bars to be named later. To be able to get on that podcast. You got to get something more. Come on, it's going to cost you.
Have some arguments about the flavors. I'll make sure that I get my favorites in there.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, appreciate you coming on, Bryce. I do want to move on. We've got a couple of trades that just went down right there toward the end. I actually had this dude coming on basically to talk about why his team didn't do anything, but they ended up doing some stuff, and I want to bring him on now. He is Lucas Smith. He is from the Locked On Cardinals podcast, and Lucas just added a couple of geriatric pitchers to his lineup. Lucas, tell us about that. How you feel?
Not great, Jeff. Not great. St. Louis Cardinals adding J.A. Happ from the Minnesota Twins and John Lester from the Washington Nationals. If this move was made 3 or 4 years ago, I'd say great, that's a win. But it's not. It's 2021. Cardinals giving up John Gant for Happ, and they're giving up Lane Thomas, an outfielder, for John Lester. They needed innings. You could say they got innings, but when the dust settles, this was a tweet out that I saw. KK Kim, who's 33, could be the youngest Cardinals starter in the rotation for the next week and a half before Miles Mikolas and Jack Flaherty get back. So kind of a perplexing move, because I don't think this move doesn't put them in the Brewers category. I don't even think this move puts them in the Reds category. A really perplexing move by St. Louis.
Boy, was that a gauntlet you just threw down for Jeff by trashing the Reds right there, man?
No, I'm saying the Reds are better than the Cardinals, even with these two moves. I really don't understand what the Cardinals were trying to think of, and I'm interested to see what spin they put on these moves.
Hey, Lucas, let me ask you this, because I picked the Cardinals to win the division this year, but I didn't see the Brewers having this kind of a rotation, and there's no way this Cardinal team's going to catch San Diego for a wild card spot, and there's no way they're going to catch Milwaukee for the Central. So, could you explain to me why they aren't doing what I said that the Braves should do as well, which is just reach into their farm, get all their best prospects, bring them up, and give them a tryout now? Like, that should be what St. Louis is doing now. This is like I'm going to let it ride with a horse that's signing a contract with a glue company.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I do think that they should bring up their prospects at some point. I do think we're going to see Matthew Liberatore by the end of this season. I think we're going to see Nolan Gorman by the end of this season. The Cardinals are really, especially their coaching staff, they're really keen in on, this is our group. These are our guys. We're going to try and win with this group. It hasn't worked. They didn't win in June. They've won a little bit more in July, but right now you're right. It's not working, but they're still very high on who they have on their roster. I was shocked they made any moves, let alone these 2 moves that they made. So it's perplexing to me why they weren't more aggressive. I think if they would have had a little bit even of a better July, would have seen them be more aggressive, but it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, if Lester had been released or DFA'd, I understand that. Like if it cost them literally nothing. But no, they traded. Even if it was a marginal prospect, you're better off keeping your young kids, because then what are you going to? Lester's going to walk after this year, and this will be what they'll win 85 instead of 83 games. It doesn't make any sense.
That's the thing about it, is that with I think especially with the Max Scherzer deal with LA, that they pretty much, in my opinion, have the World Series is theirs to lose, right? So I saw this wasn't just me. I think Josh Neighbors also talked about this, host of Locked On Nationals, that every move now needs to be with 2022 in mind. Neither one of these players are going to be on the Cardinals staff in 2022, which makes this move even more perplexing. That they weren't even getting talent for next year. It makes little to no sense. I mean, I try to put a positive spin on thing, but it makes no sense.
And they're not getting a pick either if they walk, right? They just walk. So they just essentially took a couple of prospects and say, hey, why don't you go to the Cardinals, and we're going to go play grab ass for a couple of months with John Lester.
Best case scenario, they have a resurgence and pitch well, but that's a top end best case scenario. I don't see that happening.
I don't get it.
Yeah, I like looking at the Cardinals rotation now. Wainwright 39, Lester 37, Happ 38. I mean, I'm scared, honestly. I'm shaking in my boots, as someone said.
I will say that the Cardinals will stop at nothing to win the 2013 World Series, and they are doing that by assembling a pitching staff to win the 2013 World Series. Why don't you trade for Michael Wacha while you're at it? But it just seems like, I don't know. They needed a DeLorean to go back in time with these pitchers to make this work. Another sci-fi film I threw in there. Okay.
The Cardinals haven't really made a – Cardinals can't get into it. It's funny. Cardinals haven't made a big trade deadline acquisition, to my memory, since Jonathan Broxton in 13 or 14, but even that one wasn't that huge. But 2011 was the last time they made any sort of splash, and that wasn't even on the deadline. That was a deadline week. So as Cardinal fans – we're really expecting a whole lot. And then there were some rumors this morning that maybe the Mets and the Cardinals were the 2 teams pushing for Story. And then you heard throughout the day that maybe the Story asking price was dropping. So you think maybe the Cardinals can work out something for Story. And it just never came to be. And it ended up being another trade deadline that could have been for St. Louis. And it's one of those things that just continues to frustrate this Cardinal fan base that has already been frustrated to the brink this season. They continue to get more frustrated.
By the way, another trade just announced, not that these are blockbuster trades, but the Giants picked up Tony Watson from the Angels. So that should give him and Tony Watson, I actually did a double take because I forgot that Tony Watson wasn't on the Giants. He was on the Giants last year. So that's interesting. They made a trade for a pitcher they already had. Jordan Luplow, is that how you pronounce his name? That's one of those names that I just see. Luplow, right? I'm not saying that wrong.
Yeah, I think it's Luplow, yeah.
Okay, Luplow is who a couple of years ago had a decent half season with the Cleveland Indians, and he's not been very good this year, and so he is going to Tampa Bay, which means he is going to be the ALCS MVP. And I didn't mean to bring up Randy Arozarena there, just another former Cardinal who would look really great in a Cardinal uniform.
He would look good right now. Although I will say the Cardinal outfielders look pretty good this season, so can't complain too much about that anymore. But we'll see.
Lane Thomas is the outfielder that's being sent to Washington in the trade for John Lester. So,
yeah, one of the outfielders that just never got enough playing time. Maybe a change of scenery will help him. I think he profiles more as a corner and outfield spot, some experience at center field, but I think that was just to get him off the team, to be honest with you. He didn't really have a spot at the major league level, but probably has a little bit of major league talent. But again, these 2 moves make little to no sense to me from a Cardinal standpoint. And Jeff, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think that it's now the Reds and Brewers are going for the division with these 2 lackluster trades that the Cardinals have made?
I definitely think so, and especially with the Cubs kind of doing what we all thought and just undressing themselves here at the trade deadline. I think it is, and honestly, it's the Reds hanging by a thread. Like, if they get double digits down, you could probably forget about it. They've got a favorable schedule coming up, but, I mean, the Brewers have just not been losing. It doesn't matter who they play, and they've got the great pitching to go along with it. So I really wonder how much ground they can gain just trading for 3 relievers like they have. And sure, they're much better than what they've had, but they aren't quite as good as Raisel Iglesias and Archie Bradley. So we're praising the front office, those who are, for putting out the fire that they made in the offseason. It's been really weird the way that things have gone here in Cincinnati this year because the team is talented. They just had very obvious holes that they waited a long time to fill.
Jeff, can I ask you a question about the Reds? Because I tried to figure this out on the show a couple of days ago. Do you think one of the things they're just trying to do is make sure they finish the season competitive, a winning team, not stumbling to the end like an afterthought, like so many previous Cincinnati seasons, trying to build on last year, making the postseason because of the extended playoffs and the truncated season? I don't think there's really any carryover from one season to the next in so many ways, but maybe having a bunch of the young players on a team that's actually good, if not great, if not playoff bound, and trying to build upon that, kind of the way that Kansas City in 2013 had their first winning season in 1,000 years when they made a few moves. And by the next year, they went on their run where they won back-to-back pennants. Do you think there's anything to be said of saying, hey, look, we're just making sure we're going to finish the team with a winning record and be a good quality team, if not a playoff team?
Absolutely. I think that they look at the criticism they've received basically ever since this ownership group took over back in 2006, and they had the grandiose statement of, we will bring winning baseball back to Cincinnati. Well, if you win more games than you lose, technically that's winning baseball. It's just we're starved for actual playoff success here. So I guess any winning record in their book is a success, but I kind of started this year with the baseline expectation of go for the postseason, not just go for more than 81 wins. So I think I will be disappointed, for one, if they somehow manage an 83 or 84 win season and miss the playoffs by a solid 7 or 8 games, which is kind of how it looks right now. I mean, the guys that they got, Michael Givens and Luis Cessa, and hopefully if Justin Wilson can kind of get back some of his former glory, definitely make the bullpen a lot more formidable. Plus, you're hoping to get some guys back from injury like Lucas Sims, TJ Anto, Michael Lorenzen. But the timing of that really has pushed everything back. We're now talking about 2020. We got 60 games to prove that they can make up a 7-game deficit, and they already had plenty of trouble making a expanded playoff with 60 games last year. I just don't know that they have the legs, if I'm being quite honest. Obviously, there's the side of me that gets a couple of beers in me and says, hell yeah, we're going to the postseason and we're going to the NLCS. But I think if I'm being realistic, I'm saying that is really a stretch right now.
Well, let me say something in the Reds' defense, though. I mean, okay, you're like, as usual, you're trashing the Reds, but I do what I always do, which is I build up Cincinnati's hopes.
As usual, yeah.
We saw that San Diego didn't make the trade for Scherzer. They didn't make the trade for Barrios. They didn't make the big, huge splash. LA is fortified. The Giants are fortified. And the combination of like Darvish and a bunch of the other star pitchers that and Snell have not been pitching well for San Diego this year. And that is and injuries are starting to catch up with that team. They're no longer no one's thinking about them as a division winner. And no one's thinking about them as a team that's going to win like 100 some odd games. They're starting to fall back. And that, again, bringing up the 2011 Red Sox, bringing up the 2012 Rangers, when you see some of these teams, they start to fall into a spiral that the starting pitching starts to mess up and the bullpen gets taxed and the lineup starts to press, you start to see that snowball. Well, right now, Cincinnati's only 4 games back in the loss column in the wild card. Yep. And maybe fortifying themselves the same way Philadelphia is doing that in the National League East is a way to say, okay, we're probably not going to do piddly-poo this year, but there's some shaky foundations. You start to see the house on these little pillars starting to shake a little bit. And if that house comes down, we're ready to take advantage of that. And I think that if the Reds are within 2 or 3 games of a playoff spot in September, then they're 4 games out of a playoff spot in July. If they're 2 games out of a playoff spot by Labor Day, I think this season has to be considered a success in many ways in Cincinnati, because you've given Reds fans reason to have hope in September.
It's true. I mean, and you're speaking to the optimistic side of me, which is what I normally am. I just try to be realistic about some things. But I think that if you're that close in September, then it makes perfect sense to call up Hunter Green. And maybe he is the little bit of something that gets you over that hump. I'm not sure
what Jacoby Ellsbury was to the Red Sox in 2007 when they brought him up, and Clay Buchholz gave that team a little spark. That could be exactly what Cincinnati has.
It's true. And I mean, you're getting me all excited thinking about that. But when I look at this, I'm just like, I've got to keep a at least realistic thought to it. And so far they've got something. I just am not sure if they have everything that they need to get there, which, by the way, before we can.
Do you think this Reds team is better than the 75 and 76 World Series champs? I think they're when I see them, I think they're neck and neck. That's what I think they are, neck and neck with a big red machine.
Sully, here around town, that's how conversations start. And it's really hard to start from that position because it's really hard to be better than those teams.
You think?
This is the Locked On MLB Trade Deadline show. Welcome in if you're just joining us. We are reacting to everything that's gone on this day. It has been a busy day, probably. In fact, it may not even be probably the best day, trade deadline day, that we've had in a long time. And we've been live talking about it for the last couple of hours. You are joining me. I'm your host of the Locked On Reds podcast, Jeff Carr. Along with me is Ryan Finkelstein, host of the Locked On Mets. He just got Javi Baez, which means there's going to be drama this weekend whenever Amir Garrett comes out of the bullpen. We've got Sully, who actually hosts Locked On MLB each and every day. We got Miller Thomas from the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, the team who has owned the Cincinnati Reds this year. And if they miss the postseason, that will be one of the first things that I point to. And right now, joining us, who's been talking about the geriatric nature of the St. Louis Cardinals roster and the confusing nature with which they've approached this trade deadline, is Lucas Smith, host of the Locked On Cardinals podcast.
Yeah, it's definitely been a bizarre one. I don't think that of all the scenarios that I imagined to this day talking about St. Louis Cardinals baseball before I get out of here, I did not expect talking about John Lester and J.A. Happ. Those are not 2 names that I expected to talk about. But if anybody who wants to hear more, I'll be talking about it on Locked On Cardinals for the next anyways. And I appreciate you having me on, Jeff, and hope you guys have a good rest of your show.
Make sure you guys follow the Locked On Cardinals podcast. Now, coming in because they just made a trade, and I'm interested to hear his thoughts on this. No longer the closer for the Buccos in PNC Park. Rich Rod is heading down south to Atlanta, and here to talk about it is Ethan Smith. Ethan, what do we think about this trade?
Ben Cherington literally waited the last minute to make not one, but 2 deals. The second one I even think is more shocking, that Michael frickin' Chavis is a Pittsburgh Pirate from the Boston Red Sox for a guy who had a 5+ ERA in Austin Davis this year. I don't know. Bryce Wilson's coming to the Buccos. Like, everything's happening in like 3 seconds right now.
Wait, what was the Boston trade?
We traded Austin Davis, who has a 5+ ERA this year, for Michael Chavis, straight up. Like, that's the trade. There's nothing else. There's no money going back and forth. It's just Michael Chavis for Austin Davis.
Okay.
That's insane.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't get that deal too much. I was looking at his ERA right before you hopped on, Ethan. I mean, it wasn't looking too good. Chavis is not like an everyday player, but he's got potential. He was one of their top prospects, a couple years ago. So he still could be a 25, 30 home run guy, maybe bat you around 260 on the Pirates. He should get a lot of playing time.
Well, yeah, and that's like the thing that I'm very excited about. Sorry, as I also look down. But then we get Ricky DeVito and Bryce Wilson from the Braves for Richard Rodriguez, which you guys were talking earlier about the Braves. I mean, are they actually going for it right now?
That's the biggest trade that they made. That's the biggest one. I mean, Richard fortify their bullpen. Yeah,
he's looked amazing all year. Like, there's nothing behind that. And realistically, I get where Sully's coming from too with the Braves and everything, and especially the Cardinals as well. But as you said, The Cardinals situation, I think that's a little more questionable because, like, the Brewers are the Brewers. They're a very good team. Jeff knows that. I know that, of course. But Ryan's Mets, again, don't have an insurmountable lead. And Braves fans know better than anybody that one year, I forget what year it was, Sully could probably help me since he's a baseball encyclopedia here, that they went into September with, I believe, like a 6 or 7 game lead in the division and blew the lead in the division at the end of the month. So
that was 2011, I believe. Yeah. That was the year that the best thing that happened to the Braves that year was that the Red Sox had an equally egregious faceplant. But the thing that made it worse was the Braves had a chance to win the wild card in the last day of the season, and they lost it. And the Cardinals snuck in and went on to win the World Series. And they wouldn't have been even to make the playoffs if the Braves had won one of their last, I think it was 3 games against Philadelphia, or something ridiculous like that. And the Cardinals were the ultimate, we're just happy to be here. And then they became really happy to be there when they won. I'm glad Bryce is in here because that would mean bringing back up a World Series where the Rangers were twice one swing away from winning the World Series. But, it's really fun to be a Ranger fan. But but when you're banking on a historic collapse, like, well, wait a minute, we could have a collapse that people talk about for decades. That's tough to do, but I guess it is good to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and from the Pirates standpoint of things, they're doing everything they should be doing right now. Frazier to the Padres was a very good deal. Got a lot of prospects back. Clay Holmes to the Yankees, got some prospects back. Richard Rodriguez and Austin Davis today, you get some prospects back. Even earlier today, they traded, oh, Lord, I can't even think of his name now. I get stage fright, guys. It's okay. But we've traded enough guys to the point where our farm system has a very big potential of being the number 1 farm system in baseball, but not good enough to beat Millard's D-backs even once.
Well, one time. They got a living human being for Austin Davis.
Yeah.
And a player whose nickname is Big Fudge.
That'll go well.
Wait. That trade wins. That trade wins. Anybody named Big Fudge.
Boston gets Big Fudge.
Max Scherzer to the Dodgers, who cares? Chris Bryant to the Giants, who cares? Joey Gallo, Anthony, I don't care. Big Fudge. That's what wins the day.
Yeah, and the crazy part about this, Sully, is when we were on Locked On MLB the other day at 2:30 at night in the crack of night, we talked about how things develop, and I was following it closely because it seemed weird, but Jason Mackey, who's one of the bigger guys and Pirates beat writers, said Richard Rodriguez and Austin Davis, who were the guys that just got traded, appeared to go out to left field, get an ovation from their guys, from their teammates, and then walk off the field. Nobody else did that outside of those 2 guys. So he's just basically in the press box way up here watching these 2 guys and analyzing where they're walking to see if anything's going on. Let it be. They both get traded. And I think, again, Ryan, I agree. That's the best deal Atlanta made for this entire deadline, and it was right at the end. I mean, they needed a guy like Richard Rodriguez right now when their starting pitching struggles a little bit, or even when it does good, to come in the 9th inning and shut things down.
I can't believe that's where he went. I mean, there's so many teams that need, I mean, no offense to the Braves, but so many teams that are playoff caliber teams that I felt needed him. I thought he was going to go to Oakland. I thought he was a perfect fit in Oakland.
Oakland, Toronto, and Philly were the top 3 teams for
Atlanta. Yeah, Philly is another one too. Yeah, but I'm just stunned. I'm stunned by some of these trades. I just can't. I don't. They're fractally confusing. They're confusing things made up of tinier confusing things. Right. Then you look at those confusing things, and those are made of confusing things. It just sort of constantly it becomes more confusing the more you analyze them. But hey, good for the Pirates. Good for the Pirates. Getting value for these players. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. Rockies fans, please take note.
Yeah, and also development-wise, Jeff, you talked about it earlier about Amir Garrett and Javi Baez in the New York series. Well, there's 2 certain teams that play tonight, very interestingly, that have no teammates now, it feels like, in the Nationals and the Cubs, as Wilson Contreras and Juan Soto go out there and just hit each other with the Spider-Man meme. Like, where did all our teammates go?
one can stand at the plate and toss the ball up and hit it, and the other guy can run around and catch it, and then they just flip flop. You know,
and that's the crazy thing that we have to not lose in translation here is all of this stuff that's happened all this week. This week has been crazy. Even like for me, the draft was crazy because it was a big thing for Pittsburgh. We saw baseball on tonight. There's games that matter that are on in like 3 hours for like East Coast and the West Coast a couple hours away, where you're going to see these things all of a sudden start to formulate, and you could really see who is the class of this division, who's the class of this conference, or the league, whatever. Sorry, football starts next week.
You're from Pittsburgh. We accept it.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, the Hall of Fame games next week. Dallas, you're going down. Sorry, Bryce, again.
Bryce has been through too much, man.
I was just saying, is this locked on roast of Bryce at this point? But I mean,
he's got Luka. He's fine.
From an outside source, how does everybody else feel about what the Pirates are doing? Like, I mean, I know it's difficult, but how do you guys feel about what we're doing instead of me just blabbering on about how happy I am about it?
I think I was just going to say, compared to the Rockies, I mean, what we had on earlier, at least they're selling. They're committing to it. So.
Yeah, they have a consistent plan. I mean, that's the thing you were saying. Like the Rockies were playing whack-a-mole, and I think the Pirates are like, okay, we know what we are, we know what we have to do. Let's try to get the most for these players, and they seem to be taking the game of let's get quantity as well. Let's just try to put as much talent as we can into our system and make it work from there. And I admire the fact that they obviously had a plan and they stuck with their plan. And I think that. It'll be, it's hard to tell how well that went, but it certainly was straightforward. And I think you're going to see, I think the Pirates have a ton of talent in their farm. And sometimes you need to just fill the farm up with other, if not star players, than just other players to develop. And I think they did a good job.
Yeah, and as the D-backs host, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty jealous because I was expecting a fire sale from my team, and so far, I mean, they've traded Escobar and Soria, but I hate the return for Escobar. We got back a 26-year-old catcher who's never played on the major league level and an 18-year-old who's not even playing in the States right now. So I don't know what those guys are going to be when they come over to the D-backs. At least the Pirates are loading up on some pretty solid prospects in these returns, and they're trading all the guys who you would have expected to get traded. We expected Escobar to be traded, but there's like 4 or 5 other players on this roster that I think should have been moved, like a Merrill Kelly Sully. So I give props to Ben Sherrington because he did the work that I think the D-backs should have done.
We broke down Merrill Kelly. I can't believe Merrill Kelly didn't get traded.
And really, I'm telling you, too, though, bringing up all this stuff about good moves and everything, the Giants realistically were like one of the quietest teams in this NL West race and got Chris Bryant.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of been swept under the rug a little bit with the Scherzer and Trey Turner news and the Padres getting Frazier as soon as they did. Chris Bryant is a San Francisco Giant. Yeah, that is insane to think about.
Yeah, and
he's keep going.
Okay, I was going to say for Lucas Smith, I mean, he's out there acquiring Lester and J.A. Happ. I'm telling you, Merrill Kelly's a better pitcher right now than both of those guys, and that would have helped out their rotation a lot more because people are kind of sleeping on Merrill Kelly right now. He's been a beast his last few starts. He's like top 6, 7 in the National League in innings pitched. Like, he's the definition of an innings eater right now. So for contenders out there, I'm surprised he wasn't picked up. I don't know what the D-backs asking price was because it seems like they want the 80th best prospect in your organization.
Yeah, I think that, by the way, I'm just going to hold this up to the camera here. This is, where can you see this? There's my pop. There's my pop with his grandkids. That's the reason. My dad is the reason why the Giants are in first place. There's no other explanation for it. He's up there, and believe me, if he's not up there, nobody's up there. And he's up there, and he's controlling the strings. He's nudging St. Peter's. He's like, give him the win today. Give him the win today. And I just wish he were alive just to figure out. My father could mispronounce anybody's name, and he would find a way to mispronounce Chris Bryant's name. I don't know how.
Like what, K-Riss?
That Brian Chris guy's pretty good.
Luke Bryan. Yeah, Luke Bryan starting in the outfield for the Giants.
I also have our sound effect for the rest of the year. Well, I have ads on YouTube, so I'll turn that down. But you got something else. It was going to be a tank firing. That's what I was going to basically be going for.
I think that you add the Giants' offense has been surprisingly potent this year, especially when you look at Dickerson has double-digit homers. What the heck is going on here? You know, Brandon Crawford's having a great year. You know, Wilmer Flores and Darren Ruff have been getting big hits. And then you put a legitimate star on this team playing for a contract who is going to be in a great – I mean, look at people talk about, you know, East Coast fans and Cub fans and everything like that. Giant fans they love their team. There's so much excitement in that stadium. It's the best stadium in baseball. They are playing a surprising. They're winning. People are they for real? I don't know. They're the best record in baseball. And we're heading into August. If that's not for real, I don't know what is. And now they've added an MVP to the team.
Yeah.
And they have pitching depth. They've got bullpen depth. I owe a huge apology to Gabe Kapler, who last year I just was screaming to fire every hour on the hour. And what he's done with this team in a division with Los Angeles, you know, in a division where LA is probably going to win 100 games this year, with a team that you know, with a fantasy baseball team, and the Giants still could have the home field advantage throughout all of baseball.
Yeah.
And then they add Chris Bryant to it. I mean, I know it's not an even year, but good Lord, this could be
2020
something.
doesn't count, right? So it is an even year. That season was fake.
Well, it doesn't for Giant fans because the Dodgers won, so you know it doesn't count.
Also, if you guys get a chance, at Cubs_live on Twitter actually caught the moment that Chris Bryant was traded, like while he was on the phone. And he literally like hugs a guy and is like crying after he gets traded from Chicago. So
that's hard. That guy should have been a Cub for life.
Yeah,
he should have been a Cub for life.
For all of you listeners, for everyone watching right now, if you ever want to say baseball is boring, that exact kind of thing is why baseball is not boring. This entire trade deadline week is exactly why baseball is not boring.
It's been a busy week for sure. And I tell you what, Ethan, I appreciate you coming on so much to talk about the deals that the Pirates have been making to reload. I'm going to bring in a guy now I have some questions for because I'm interested on his takes. There's been lots of rumors surrounding the team that plays in a park called Petco, but there's not been a whole lot of deals been made. Now, they did get a really good bat, but there were some other guys that I thought they were going to get to, and they didn't quite land them. He is Javi Reyes. He is the host of the Locked On Padres podcast. Javi,
what an entrance.
How we look?
Oh, what a hat. What a hat.
Man, you know, sometimes there's tragedies and sometimes there's comedies. Well, the Padres are a little bit of both this deadline. It was really tough, man.
You remember when they had Scherzer?
I don't even want to like.
Dude, I think you just crashed Javi.
I didn't hear it. I didn't even hear it.
Javi,
I don't know what you're talking about. Ken Rosenthal doesn't count. Look, it's in fairness. So I'll do the pros first. The pros is that one, I don't think it bites as hard if they hadn't never reported he was coming to the Padres. I think that's like 90% of it. The other 5% of it is that they got Trey Turner too, which is freaking stupid. And then on the other hand, though, you look at it, they still have a lot of assets. If you want to look at it that way, they still have like really great prospects, whether or not they want to literally have them play, or if you want to have it that you use them for future trades, maybe someone else just appears on the trade market over the summer. You never know. And the bottom line is AJ Preller has assembled a really good team, and that doesn't take away from that. It's just disappointing that I'm getting notifications about you give up Anderson Espinosa for Jake Barizdik, who's just a defensive player, and that's it. I don't know. It's weird. I'm surprised that they didn't even get like a back end rotation guy. The counter to that is also like if Snell was just an average pitcher this year, we wouldn't be in as big of a situation. I wouldn't mind a back end guy. You get a Tyler Anderson type. I know Ethan was just on here. Like that might be cool. A guy that gives you innings because Weathers is just his innings limit is coming up, and Dinelson Lamet is just hurt all the time. But the fact that Snell is just basically Robbie Ray at this point, and I'm talking bad Robbie Ray, like the guy who just walks everybody. Shout out Millard. I know he's here. That's the really biggest thing. Snell might go down as Preller's biggest miss, I think, in his tenure. You could argue Hosmer, but I still think that there's parts of me that thinks that the Haas contract was like ownership stepping in a little bit, saying, oh, we want a World Series champion. We want to show everyone we're legit and we're going to spend money. So I'm not totally sure how much I'm being generous to my guy, but the Snell thing might be the biggest miss of his tenure. And that's why all of those things compounded make it kind of a rough day for Padres fans. But you know what? At the same time, I still get to watch Tatis every day. So I think I'll get slightly over it by the time tonight rolls around. And they have an easy schedule for the next couple of weeks.
Javi, when you saw teams like Philadelphia picking up Gibson and St. Louis picking up Lester, and those are two teams that are basically on the really have a very, very slim chance of playing a single October game. Do you look at those and say, like, yeah, if we'd picked up Lester for nothing or picked up Gibson for not that much and put them, okay, there's our 3 and 4 guy there. You roll the dice that you'll get like 5 or 6 good starts out of John Lester down the stretch or whatever. Do you think that should, instead of trying to make the giant Scherzer splash or the thing, do you think they should have just tried to go for quantity and just try to get as many veterans on that team as possible? Do you think that would have been at least a more doable plan than I don't know what they did?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I always have been a proponent of just believing that I don't like assuming what prospects it'll take to get X player, because on one hand, the Dodgers just ruined the rest of the season for everybody. And they were just like, yeah, we'll take Trey Turner. Why not? We'll give you this one prospect who people have high on their boards, but they've been trying to trade him for like a year now. So maybe he's not even that good. I don't know. So that's a little bit confusing. And then on the other hand, you look at teams like the Twins and the Blue Jays, where they did give up a decent haul for Jose Barrios. So it's just like, baseball is so inconsistent with what teams. This is the whole thing, though, is every team thinks differently about things. Not everybody pulls up Baseball America and is like, all right, yes, that is objectively the top 5 prospects or top 10 prospects of a team's farm system. You just never really know. I do think that they should have tried to get at least a guy. I didn't like Kyle Gibson. I just thought that dude was more known for being the flyer you pick up in your fantasy baseball league than hoping that it's that one day where he gives you the good start, because he's had good starts before and then he gets lit up in one inning. This year is the first time he'd ever been good. So I wasn't like upset they didn't get him. I know that people floated the Gallo Gibson for Mackenzie Gore deal a decent amount heading up to the deadline. So it's disappointing, but at the same time, I do agree with you. Like, maybe just get some of those back end guys that don't cost too much, almost like what the Braves did for bats today. But then again, maybe Preller, who seems to succeed a lot more when the market is a little bit more repressed, a little bit more calmed down. He goes in there in the offseason and is like, I'm going to get Musgrove. Nobody's talking about this guy. I think he's good. You know, he does a little bit better with those type of moves, and it's panned out. The biggest problem is Snell. If Snell was just better, it's not viewed as much of an Armageddon as I think a lot of Padres fans are viewing it.
Yeah, but even with the hindsight with what we've seen from Snell, I mean, I think we're all doing that deal again if it's on the table for us, because I mean, it was a steal what the Padres did for Blake Snell. So even though it hasn't worked out, I mean, I think you still do the deal again if presented to you.
And you still could say, hey, look at what if he has a good 2 months? I mean, like, okay, you're a wash. He's not going to win the Cy Young Award, but you could have a decent couple of weeks. I mean, think about it. We have about what's left in the season is roughly all the games that we played in 2020. So imagine if someone had a good 60-game stretch. And, you know, if you're asking Snell to say, hey, look, we know you're not going to win a Cy Young. This is not going to be your top year. But if you play well down the stretch, I mean, there was one year that John Smoltz in Atlanta early in his career was like 3-10 or something like that.
That's why Sully gets paid the big bucks. Love it.
He was
the historical stuff. Yeah.
Well, he was dreadful the first half, and they sent him to a sports psychiatrist and everything like that. And the second half, he was on fire. And if I remember correctly, he started Game 7 of the World Series that year and matched Morris 0-for-0, and he threw a shutout to clinch the National League Championship Series. So, you know, if you looked at his record that year, you're like, oh, okay, all right. But then, you know, come the big moment. The greatest one for the Yankees was El Duque. If you looked at El Duque, Orlando Hernandez, El Duque, in the regular season, he was fine. It was nothing special. Come October, he went to the phone booth, came out as Superman, and was unstoppable. There are those players who do that. And maybe Snell, if they get to the postseason, they get past the wild card game, and if he gives you a couple of decent starts, man, a mediocre season. I mean, Red Sox fans will remember Derek Lowe pitched brilliantly against the Yankees and the Cardinals in the playoffs. He won the clinching game of the ALCS and the World Series. He was so bad that regular season, he was demoted to the bullpen. So, but no one remembers that. They remember what you do in October. So I think it's called reverse Clayton Kershaw syndrome.
It's just the fear, man. The fear of, like, if the Dodgers are for some reason the wild card team. At this point, I'd hope that the Dodgers just win the division. I'd rather take my chances. I just don't want to go up against Scherzer in a wild card game. Just screw that. You know what I mean? Like, no. I don't care at all.
You have to face your fear. You must face your fear. I'd rather
face your fear.
Face your fear. Face your fear, Javi.
I will say this. The other positive that could have happened, if they didn't add anybody, if they just were able to offload Eric Hosmer, it would have been lovely. I would have absolutely loved it. Not to slander the man too much, but to be honest with you, I've always felt like the San Diego media is way soft on him compared to other players. I just, like, why are we acting like this dude is, like, they kind of treat him a little bit the way, like, the Cubs fans are treating Chris Bryant. And the difference is that, Chris Bryant did a lot for them. I don't know if you guys saw that video of him being emotional. That made me so sad.
No, we talked about it earlier.
Yeah. I think offloading Hosmer would have been so good. But again, I guess you're right. You could hope that Blake Snell comes back, and maybe he's been so bad that there has to be a positive regression at some point. And you have to hope that, maybe Haas does go like he was in the playoffs with the Royals. I don't know. And also the bottom line is this. There's still a bright future. You've got all the stars on the team already. This is a team that's basically, unlike, say, the Giants, this is a team that its core is intact for a while. With Tatis, Machado, Grisham, Cronenworth, like, those guys aren't going anywhere. Cronenworth's Fangraphs ranked him as, like, one of the top 20 assets in all of baseball because he doesn't cost anything, and he's not a free agent until, like, 3 years from now. So that's a really big thing for them. And you also look at it as you get Clevenger back next year. That's another guy to add to your rotation. And also, the assets they have are still assets. If they ever do want to move Abrams, who's a top 10 prospect in baseball, right? Gore, Robert Hassel, all these guys, they still have plenty of moves that they could potentially make. I don't want to just give up on Pro already. Bottom line, it's still the best team they've had in like 20 years. So if we're going to win 95 games and lose, that sucks. But also, let's just make fun of the Dodgers and say, congratulations, you guys need the Avengers Endgame budget in order to finally win. So congrats to the Dodgers.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see how that all unfolds. I will say this, though. We have had a great time talking about this MLB trade deadline right here on Locked On MLB. As for right now, though, we're going to wave goodbye to our Locked On MLB host, Sully. I appreciate you hanging on for so long, talking trade deadline and who's good and who's not, and talking about sci-fi movies as well.
All right. Hey, this has been a blast. And, man, it's going to be interesting looking at the aftermath of some of this. There's so many trades. I guarantee you there's going to be a moment where you'll be like, oh, I forgot they traded for him. Oh, wait, he's on the team. Like there'll be a trade that slipped through or you totally forgot because you're distracted by Bryant or you're distracted by Scherzer. So there'll be someone else. So there will be some move that will be made that will be the move of October that we're not talking about right now. But I'll just say one interesting thing is that it'll be interesting to see the two teams that had their franchise-defining championship recently, the Cubs and the Nationals, who both put two sticks of dynamite in the team and blew it up. It'll be interesting to see how many of the players they got back are going to develop. And it'll be, I think, very interesting to see which one of those two franchises will get back to becoming a legitimate pennant contender the fastest. And none of us know right now because we don't really know what they got in return. But I salute the Nats for saying, hey, look, if we're going to do this, let's just rebuild and go for it. And I think that Juan Soto is going to walk up and have no idea who's left. But it'd be interesting if they build a team around Juan Soto with these young players. I think it'll be really interesting. But, hey, last third of the season, stretch time. Down the stretch we come. And this has been a lot of fun. Check us out at Locked On MLB, wherever you get your podcasts. Shove a Built Bar in your face and love life.
Take it easy, Sully. We are going to look forward to a rest of an amazing MLB season here. And as we kind of wrap up, this has been a really fun show. I still want to talk a little bit more about this trade deadline, and we're going to bring her back in. We actually started the show talking with one of the most active acquiring teams, active adding teams, buying teams, whatever the team is, whatever they did, they bought a lot. They brought them in, and they're going to try and make a run for it this year. Going to bring AJ back in to talk about the Blue Jays and just where she thinks, especially after adding a piece, and maybe have her and Miller talk a little bit, since Joaquin Soria is heading from the desert to Canada.
Yeah, I have no idea where I was there the last hour and a half. I'm just in some sort of limbo zone.
You're in bullpen there. That was cool. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, thank you for the new pitcher, Miller. We'll take good care of them. And as Jamie Campbell pointed out on Twitter, the first Blue Jay Joaquin Soria ever struck out was Vernon Wells. So that just tells you how long he's been in the league.
It's been a nice long career.
Yeah, I wish I could say I'm going to miss Joaquin Soria, but the D-backs have the lowest save percentage in baseball, so I barely saw him in the 9th inning, so I really don't even know how good he is. So hopefully you get to see him more on your team this year than I did.
I'm kind of hoping this turns out like the Joaquin Benoit deal from like 2015 when we got like a veteran pitcher who was doing all right on a scuffling team. And then he comes and just is lights out, and hopefully he doesn't tear his ACL running in from the bullpen. That's all I can hope for. But yeah, like you said, Blue Jays have been very busy over the deadline period. Let's say that. And they've just completely reworked this pitching staff, which, given the lineup they have and are able to put out on a regular basis, that's kind of what they needed to do.
Yeah, and I was really looking at the Blue Jays as possibly one of those Trevor Story teams, because I remember that blockbuster they made like years ago when they got like Jose Reyes, or they got like Troy Tulowitzki and everything. So I thought we were going to have a little, reminisce, like a repeat of that now with Trevor Story replacing Tulowitzki, just always taking the premier shortstop from the Colorado Rockies.
I thought about it when I was on with Paul Holden. I thought about it. I mentioned it.
They thought about it.
But
as Paul bangs his head against the wall for like the 30th time today.
Yeah, the Padres losing today, let me be clear. The Rockies, it's like, the first there are losers, then there are bigger losers, then there's 50 feet of crap, and then there's the Rockies.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like, who did the Blue Jays give up to get Troy Tulowitzki and LaTroy Hawkins in that deal? They gave up garbage person Jose Reyes. They gave up Jesus Tinoco, who I believe just got recalled by Colorado again. And Jeff Hoffman, he of the 13 career wins and having pitched with two of you guys, I believe. So yeah, just prospects are not like, they're nice, but they're far from sure things. And I think the Blue Jays have been building up all this capital. And that just allowed them to get these guys who are proven commodities, a Joaquin Soria, a Jose Barrios, a Adam Simber, like guys who can help now and help this team hopefully realize its full potential. If not now, then next year when, Boston should lose all this magic. Beans. I don't know what they did in Boston to suddenly be great, but like they can't be this good again. They just can't be. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys care about run differential, but the Red Sox are plus 57 on the year. The Blue Jays are plus 97 on the year. The Yankees are sitting at -6 on the season. So I just found that interesting to see the Blue Jays and the Rays. Rays at plus 103, Blue Jays at plus 97. So according to run differential, Blue Jays actually second best team right now in that division.
And
there's been an interesting talk. It was a couple of years ago around the Reds and the Pythagorean win-loss. So I'm guessing there's lots going on Blue Jays Twitter or something like that about Pythagorean win-loss.
Good old math, am I right?
And that was the thing with the 2015 team too. It was like middling, but they had a great run differential because like like same thing. They could win these blowout games, just blow the doors off teams, and then lose 5-4 because one guy in the bullpen just couldn't keep it together. And that was a big problem in recent days for the Blue Jays, just having starters not being able to go out there and having to rely on 5 different guys in the bullpen, and all 5 of them have to be good. Otherwise, it ain't going to happen. And Trevor Richards would give up a home run to Alex Verdugo. Or, Tyler Chatwood would do something. Anything but throw a strike. And it was just maddening to see the Blue Jays continue to lose so many close games. So many games that they should have won. And like I said, we'll see what this does.
May I have 3 final words before I head out?
Yeah.
Oh, no,
I was about to say
one for each prong on your hat.
We've been
one for
with
each. Thank you. Yes, one for each prong. You see. All right. So here's the first one right here. First of all, I just find it funny. Trevor's story said, "I'm confused and I don't really have anything good to say about how the situation, how it unfolded."
He's done.
So that's really good. Enjoy those compensatory picks or whatever. Second. What was I going to say? I'm forgetting my second point because that one was really funny. Just congrats to Ryan. Watching Baez and Lindor could potentially be at minimum very fun. Worried about the strikeouts and stuff, but that's a whole other thing. I can't wait. And then also, I will say, objectively, even though the Padres made me sad, this is like the most fun deadline I can remember since 2015 at the earliest. It was really wild, and yeah. Stay golden, everybody. And yeah, here's the last one. I forgot what my other point was going to be, but yeah, take care, guys.
Well, Javi, we appreciate having you on, and we'll look forward to see what the NL West brings. It's going to be interesting. I mean, we've talked a lot about the National League. I do want to get your take, AJ, and then kind of go around a little bit as we wrap up. What's the AL picture look like? I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about the National League, but that's mostly because we've all been National League guys.
Yeah, so you got to bring the AL girl in. I got ya. It looks a lot like it did in the 2020 season, where you have a lot of a few teams at the top just picking on a lot of other teams that don't really know what they're doing. And yet again, the Blue Jays are in like that middle zone, like that above average tier where like, yeah, maybe, but then they'll just get blown out by the Rays because Hunter Renfroe is just a monster. But yeah, we saw like basically if you thought you had a shot at taking the AL pennant, you made a move. Oakland went and fortified its bullpen, got Andrew Chafin, got Starling Marte from Miami. Houston totally redid its bullpen behind Ryan Presley. Chicago just raided the Cubs over and over just because they could. And then as I mentioned earlier, the Yankees got more guys to hit sandbox home runs in that Little League park. The Red Sox, it was kind of surprising that they didn't do much besides the injured Kyle Schwarber. But there are those teams that think they can get it are going to try and get it, and it's going to make for some really exciting baseball in the AL. And apologies to basically everyone who is a fan of those teams that I did not mention. Seattle might have a shot, but yeah.
Seattle, come on now.
I know. Millard, I have to throw them a bone. We got a lot of Canadians that go down to Seattle and want to at least think the game's going to be competitive instead of just, a Blue Jays route.
I mean, 7 games above 500 this deep in the season for Seattle. I mean, this has to be the best season of the last 25 years for them. So shout out Mariners fans. I'm kind of upset the Red Sox didn't. I mean, they got Schwarber, but I felt like they really needed some starting rotation depth. I mean, after Evaldi right now, since post June 1st, I've been seeing some stats like their rotation has just fallen off a cliff. So we'll see how long that rotation can keep afloat. I know Chris Sale is coming back pretty soon. Sounds like he's got a couple rehab starts in him before he makes his way to the major league level. So we'll see how much that adds a boost to that rotation. But yeah, I'm surprised to see the Red Sox didn't really acquire any starting pitching. They got a couple of relievers, but I didn't really understand trading Michael Chavis either. I mean, great deal for Ethan Smith of Locked On Pirates to just pick him up for nothing.
Yeah. Well, now the Pirates have a first baseman that hopefully won't get caught in a rundown with Javi Baez at first.
So do you guys believe in the Yankees at all to make a run here, late in the season? I'm not even saying to the World Series, but how far do you think they can go in this postseason? Are you still looking at them as true contenders?
Start in New York.
I was gonna say, first off, did you see the NBA front court they have starting the outfield tonight? They got Stanton, Judge, and Gallo. They're like all 6'6" or taller. It's ridiculous. But I mean, yeah, look, the Yankees. It seems like a lot of times they'll make these additions at the deadline, and they finish seasons pretty strong. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they were at least a wild card team.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
I'm gonna ask Stacy to put this on mute for just a second. Stacy Gotsulis, our Locked On Yankees host. The Yankees still don't really have the starting pitching outside Garrett Cole, I think, to compete. Like they are going to get into some slugfests, absolutely. But they run into pitchers who can keep the ball down and keep them from hitting home runs out of that litter box that they want to call the stadium. And I have like 5 more names I can derivatively call Yankee Stadium because it is tiny and garbage and should be at least 20 feet extended. But I don't see who you throw out after Garrett Cole. Do you rely on Corey Kluber to channel like 2016 Klubot and get you a playoff win? Do you trust Jamison Tyon, who Ethan can tell you has never pitched in any kind of playoff scenario that's mattered? Do you trust Jordan Montgomery, who's all right, but again, not a guy who you're like, go get me a second win? And I think that's been the problem with the Yankees all season. And they made moves to address their offense. They made moves to address the lack of production they got from the left side of the plate, but without actually going out and getting a third pitcher to pair with Cole and whoever the heck out of that group I mentioned. I don't see them winning because I think they're going to get outslugged, and that will neutralize the bullpen led by garbage person Aroldis Chapman. And I didn't mention garbage person Domingo Germán. God, there's so many garbage people on the Yankees.
I think I'll just play devil's. I do want to see what Nestor Cortez has. I don't know if he's going to be healthy when it comes to playoff time, but I am interested to see. But I'm kind of with you. I think if they make it out of the East or if they make it into a wild card spot or something like that, they just don't have the horses to contend with the guys and the White Sox and I don't even know that they could beat the Astros in a series, to be honest with you. It's going to be interesting how they match up, but I don't see them going very far if they make it to October.
Well, one thing I would say is for our friends at Bet Online, take the over on any run line for a Yankee game with bad pitching and great hitting. Just take the over every single time.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give at least respect to the Yankees for doubling down on what they already do good, which is just smash home runs. So they're just trying to lead the league in home runs, I guess. I really wanted them to go after like a Starling Marte. I felt like he would have been a nice speed guy at the top of their lineup. I love that pickup by Oakland, honestly. I feel like he's one of the most underrated players in baseball.
Yeah. That would have been like before the Anthony Rizzo deal, that would have been like, are you going after Whit Merrifield or not?
Yeah.
So just to shout out our Royals fans there.
Shout out to the perennial dude on the name list of possible trade targets this trade deadline season. I feel like Whit Merrifield's been on there for like the last decade, and he's just never been traded. I don't know that he ever will. He'll be a lifetime Royal, and every year he'll be on that list.
Yeah.
Where do you guys stand on Astros back to the World Series? Are you guys pro it? It sounds like no one's pro Astros.
Who's pro Astros in the World Series?
Yeah,
Come on.
Is anyone aside from the Astros fans?
I love
and maybe Jim Crane, because apparently he's broke and needs them to maintain their payroll where they're at.
I love narratives and drama, so I'm pro Astros going back to the World Series and just mucking it up for just this reason. No one wants to see it. No one wants to talk about it. No one's going to be happy, but it'll get ratings. So I'm all in on Astros back to the World Series.
To be fair, it's not like you're expecting the Diamondbacks back anytime soon. So chaos is your friend.
Yeah, that's all I'm rooting for is chaos.
Chaos. I honestly, I think out of the AL, it's going to be the White Sox. I don't know that Tony La Russa would be the reason, but they have such a talented team. I think they're going to put that all together. I think if they don't make it, Tony La Russa is the reason that they don't make it.
Yeah.
But if they make it, are we sending like what we did with Paul George? Are we doing an apology form for Tony La Russa? They make it to the World Series? No. All right.
No.
That was a quick convo. No. All right.
No one's apologizing to La Russa.
Yeah.
He never gets apologized.
No. Absolutely.
Well, there we are. We do have one more person in the chat says, I'm pro Astros in the World Series with Altuve as the MVP. Shout out to Johan Ramirez Montesinos. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Johan.
No offense, but Johan also has a Manchester City avatar. So
well, there you go. He likes him some diva super teams, I think. Is what we're going for here. Well, I tell you what, guys, this has been a lot of fun. We have talked MLB trade. How about I get it out right? MLB trade deadline all day for like 2.5 hours, but it might as well be all day because this has been a fantastic day. Lots of trades have been made. Please, while you guys are our last hosts, shout out your podcast real quick.
I host Locked On Mets, so I'll be right after this recording a podcast to talk about Javi Baez before this game tonight. We're going head-to-head here, me and Jeff, once again.
Yep. Miller Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks. I guess we'll talk about Joakim Soria. Not much to talk about there. Have fun. We'll see you guys soon, D-Backs Nation.
Half an hour on Joakim Soria. Get ready.
Looking forward to it. You can find me as the host of Locked On Blue Jays. I'll be doing a couple podcasts just recapping all this probably. There was a lot. And you can find me on Twitter at @A_J_Andrews. The underscores are there because Twitter is dumb, but I'm still verified and Sully's not. So
there you go. And I am Jeff Carr, host of the Locked On Reds podcast. Shout out to Johan. He does say he's a Cincinnati Reds fan, so he's not a fan of all the Super Diva teams, just the teams where the owners don't want to build one.
Oh, Joey Votto's the biggest diva in the league. Come on.
Wait a minute.
I can say that because he's ours, and I get to joke about that.
Franchise record, most games in a row of hitting a home run. I love it. I love the fact that he's setting records and he's 37 years old and he's going to extend it tonight, Ryan. It's going to happen. I'm about to record my podcast too. So we're going to preview this series and talk about why the Reds didn't trade for any more than just 3 relievers. That's all coming up on the Locked On Reds podcast. But this has been the Locked On MLB Trade Deadline show. Thank you to Ryan, to Miller, to AJ, to Ethan, to Sully, to the other Paul. There's 2 Pauls, Paul Sully and Paul Holden. Thank you to Lucas. Thank you to God, I know I'm missing people. Thank you to Bryce for coming on and being Eeyore. Thank you to Jeff Snyder for coming on and gloating about Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. And thank you. I think that's it.
People.
I think that's it. Thank you to the rest of the network because, you guys rock as well. This is do it for our broadcast. Make sure you go check out the local team podcast of your favorite